Chapter 1939. Lu Ming glanced at the young woman. Her cultivation could not be hidden from Lu Ming's eyes. The young woman's cultivation was in the peak bright sacred realm, significantly higher than the others. No wonder she was so confident. Besides, Yan Song's men had referred to her as General Tianjiao. It was likely that her identity was not simple. After the others left, the young woman stared at Lu Ming with glittering eyes and said, "Are you really a spy?" "I'm not. I already told you that I'm only passing by to ask around." Lu Ming shrugged helplessly and explained once again. "I believe you." The young woman stared at Lu Ming and said, "Do you really believe me that much?" It was Lu Ming's turn to be astounded. "Because you're very calm." The young woman said, "I've been paying attention to you since I came here. You were very calm when facing Yan Song or me. Even when Yan Song said he was going to kill you, you were still calm, as if you weren't worried at all. It's as if you could leave at any time. It's not an act, but a reflection of your true attitude." "Oh, is that so?" Lu Ming rubbed his nose. It was true that he was not worried about their cultivation, thus he was able to remain calm. A person with such an attitude is definitely not an ordinary person. "Besides, I'm practicing the serpent battle flesh, but I can feel a great pressure from you. Your spirit is definitely not ordinary." The young woman's eyes glittered as she stared at Lu Ming, as if she was trying to see through Lu Ming's thoughts. "You're so sure that I'm not a spy based on these 2 points? It doesn't seem to be enough." Lu Ming smiled. "My instinct is telling me that these 2 points are enough." The young woman said. "Instinct?" Lu Ming was confused. "Yes, a woman's instinct. Don't you know that a woman's instinct is very accurate at times?" The young woman said. Lu Ming wore a wry smile. He could not refute that. It was unwise to discuss with a woman whether a woman's intuition was accurate or not. "So, I'm very curious. Who are you? Which country are you from?" The young woman was still staring at Lu Ming. "I've already said that I'm just passing by. In the past, I was cultivating on a deserted island and had just come into being," Lu Ming said casually. "Really?" A ray of light flashed in the young woman's eyes. Her figure suddenly moved. Like a phantom, she rushed towards Lu Ming. Her speed was astonishing. Her palm chopped towards Lu Ming. Of course, this speed was only for ordinary people. To Lu Ming, this speed was no different from a snail. When the young woman's palm was about to hit Lu Ming's body, Lu Ming raised his hand and gently struck out with his palm. Bang! Lu Ming's palm and the young woman's palm collided. The young woman's delicate body trembled and her figure drifted backward. On the other hand, Lu Ming did not move at all. What a strong cultivation! At your age in the 9 nations of the sea, there are only a handful of people with your cultivation. I know every single one of them, but I don't know anyone like you. It seems that my intuition was right. I'm really curious now." The young woman's eyes shone with a strange light. "Didn't I tell you? I just came into being." "Of course, you don't know me," Lu Ming said. "Oh, if that's the case, why don't you stay in the Divine Wirm Army?" "I'm the Marshal of the Divine Wirm Army, Ruan Tianjiao," the young woman said. "Stay here? Impossible. I won't stay here for long. I'll leave soon." Lu Ming shook his head. He had entered this world to look for the Heavenly Emperor's treasure. He could not stay here for long. "You don't have to stay here for long. A short period of time is fine too. You can leave whenever you want. Moreover, didn't you say that you wanted to gather information? Perhaps I can help you," Ruan Tianjiao said. Lu Ming's eyes flickered. He pondered for a moment and said, "All right, I'll stay here for the time being." Lu Ming indeed needed to gather information. Yuan Tianjiao seemed to be very powerful in this place. As the marshal of an army, she might be able to provide him with a lot of help. Yuan Tianjiao's face lit up. She had a feeling that Lu Ming was extraordinary. "What's your name?" Yuan Tianjiao asked. "Lu Ming." Lu Ming nodded. "What do you want to ask?" Yuan Tianjiao asked curiously. "This. I want to know where this place is." Lu Ming said. "This entire island is a country called the Bright Flame Country." Yuan Tianjiao said. "What about above? Are there other countries? How big is this world? Are there any ancient ruins?" Lu Ming asked several questions in a row. "You don't even know these?" Yuan Tianjiao was very surprised. "Haven't I been in seclusion? I just came out." Lu Ming touched his nose and said. "There's an introduction to this world in this jade token. Take a look." A jade token appeared in Yuan Tianjiao's hand and she handed it to Lu Ming. Lu Ming took it and scanned it with his spiritual consciousness. He began to read the knowledge in the jade token. After reading it, Lu Ming had a rough idea of what was going on. It turned out that this world was called the Infinite Seas Realm. Most of the territory in this world was the sea. However, there were also countless islands in the sea. Some of the islands were not big and were deserted. They were not suitable for humans to live in. Some of the bigger islands were very wide and suitable for humans to live in. Countless martial artists occupied these islands and formed countries. The Bright Flame Island they were on was a big island. The entire island was a country called the Bright Flame Country. Yuan Tianjiao was one of the 5 marshals of the Bright Flame Country, the marshal of the Divine Wirm army. As for the ancient ruins you mentioned, there are indeed some in the vast seas realm. When we return to the capital, I'll organize the information about those ruins and give it to you. How about that? Yuan Tianjiao said. How long before you return to the capital? Lu Ming asked. A month. Don't tell me you can't even wait for a month. Sure. Lu Ming nodded. From the introduction just now, the Infinite Seas realm was huge and there were countless islands. It would be too difficult for him to search for them one by one. He did not know how long it would take. With Yuan Tianjiao's help, it would save him a lot of time. Come with me. I'll arrange a military tent for you. You can stay there first. After saying that, Yuan Tianjiao walked out of the tent. Lu Ming followed him. When they walked out of the tent, they saw Yen Song and the others standing not far away from the tent. When they saw Lu Ming coming out with Yuan Tianjiao, they were stunned. Tianjiao, how is it? Is this brat a spy? I suggest that we kill him immediately. Yen Song said. You're mistaken. He's not a spy. Now that I've investigated thoroughly, you can all leave. Yuan Tianjiao waved his hand. What? He's not a spy. Tianjiao, don't be fooled by him. I suggest we cripple him first and then slowly interrogate him. Men, take this kid down. Chapter 1940. Enough. Just as the 2 half-sages walked toward Lu Ming, Yuan Tianjiao shouted coldly. He looked at the 2 half-sages and scolded, stand down. The 2 half-sages froze. They didn't know whether to move or not. In the end, they looked at Yen Song. Tianjiao, what is the meaning of this? This person is a spy. Yen Song said with an ugly expression. I said that he is not a spy. He is my guest. Also, this is the Divine Wirm army, not the Yen family. I am the marshal of the Divine Wirm army. Do you understand? Yuan Tianjiao's eyes were like lightning as he looked at the 2 half-sages. The 2 half-sages had ugly expressions, but they still retreated. Lu Ming, let's go. Ruan Tianjiao nodded at Lu Ming and walked forward. Yen Song's face was extremely gloomy. Ruan Tianjiao took a few steps and stopped. He looked at Yen Song and said, "Yen Song, let me tell you. Don't call me by my name in the future. We are not that close." After saying that, he ignored Yen Song and strode forward. "Damn it, bitch!" Yen Song clenched his fists. His face, which could be considered handsome, was twisted with anger. "That Yen Song seems to be interested in you." After walking for a while, Lu Ming said with a smile. "Humph, he is just relying on the fact that his father is the state preceptor and his sister is the emperor's favorite concubine to do whatever he wants. He is a typical hedonistic son of a rich family. Who knows how many girls he has harmed on a daily basis. Now, he has come to the Divine Wirm army camp to pester me." Ruan Tianjiao said with a cold face. Lu Ming thought to himself, it seems that Ruan Tianjiao has a bad impression of Yen Song. Lu Ming, Yen Song is a narrow-minded person. You have offended him today. Be careful in the future. Ruan Tianjiao warned. "It's fine." Lu Ming smiled faintly, his expression indifferent. A mere Yen Song was not enough to enter his eyes. Soon, they arrived at a military tent. This was where Lu Ming would be staying. "Lu Ming, this is a military order. Take it, and you can freely enter the Divine Dragon Army's barracks in the future." Nguyen Tianjiao handed a token to Lu Ming. "Thank you." Lu Ming took it and cupped his fists to express his gratitude. He was a little surprised. He had only just met Nguyen Tianjiao, but he trusted him so much. After that, Lu Ming temporarily stayed with the Divine Dragon Army. In the blink of an eye, a few days had passed. Lu Ming and some of Nguyen Tianjiao's subordinates had become rather familiar with each other. As for Lu Ming, he knew more about this world, the Bright Fire Country, and even Nguyen Tianjiao. What surprised Lu Ming was that Ruan Tianjiao's status in Ming Yen country was much higher than Lu Ming had imagined. The goddess of war in Ming Yen country was what everyone in Ming Yen country called Nguyen Tianjiao. Ruan Tianjiao was born in a military family. Her talent was extremely rare. At a young age, her cultivation had reached the great circle of the Bright Saint realm. She stood at the peak of the Bright Saint country and was one of the top experts in the Bright Fire country. She had made great contributions to the Bright Fire country and was known as the goddess of war. She was loved by the people of the Bright Fire country. Yen Song was the son of the state preceptor. His sister was the king's most beloved imperial concubine. Yen Song was lustful by nature and had harmed many women. Now, he had set his sights on Nguyen Tianjiao and often went to the Divine Dragon Army's barracks to harass Nguyen Tianjiao. It seems that the martial strength of this world isn't very high. Lu Ming pondered. According to the information that Lu Ming had gathered, he realized that the martial strength of this world wasn't high. It couldn't be compared to Yuanlu. Nguyen Tianjiao's cultivation was at the Great Sage realm and she was the most powerful person in Ming Yen country. In the blink of an eye, another few days had passed. Lu Ming stood on a mountain peak and looked into the distance. On the flat ground in front of him, an army rode on strange beasts and galloped on the ground. Their murderous intent formed a huge dragon that roared at the sky. It's a good army. They have been through hundreds of battles. Unfortunately, their cultivation is a little weak and their battle formation isn't exquisite enough. Lu Ming had many thoughts in his mind. Soon, a few figures stepped on the air and landed in front of Lu Ming. It was Nguyen Tianjiao and a few of his subordinates. "Lu Ming, what do you think of my Divine Dragon Army?" Nguyen Tianjiao asked. "No." Lu Ming shook his head. "No?" Nguyen Tianjiao was shocked. "Brat, you don't know anything. The Divine Dragon Army is ranked first among the 5 strongest armies in Ming Yen country. How dare you say that it's no good?" What a joke! One of Nguyen Tianjiao's subordinates was instantly enraged. He widened his eyes and looked as though he wanted to eat Lu Ming alive. No means no. Other than the battle spirit and murderous aura, the rest is useless, especially the battle formation. Lu Ming curled his lips. Since Nguyen Tianjiao wanted to ask him, he would naturally tell the truth. A few of the subordinates glared at Lu Ming. They had originally thought that Lu Ming might be a top figure. Now, they felt that Lu Ming was just a boastful person. Lu Ming, my divine dragon battle formation is the best battle formation in Ming Yen country. How dare you say that it's useless? Nguyen Tianjiao's expression was ugly. He looked at Lu Ming with a tinge of resentment. You asked me yourself. I'm just speaking from the bottom of my heart. Lu Ming touched his nose and was speechless. Does that mean that you have a stronger battle formation? Nguyen Tianjiao continued to look at Lu Ming with a tinge of resentment. I do. Take this and take a look. A jade token appeared in Lu Ming's hand and he threw it to Nguyen Tianjiao. Nguyen Tianjiao took the jade token and scanned it with her spiritual consciousness. She exclaimed, "This is the true dragon battle formation. What a wonderful battle formation." Lu Ming had indeed thrown the true dragon battle formation to Nguyen Tianjiao. Back when he was helping Lu Ming to fight for the position of Crown Prince, he had made a few copies of the jade token. This battle formation was useless to Lu Ming, so there was no harm in giving it to Nguyen Tianjiao. Seeing Nguyen Tianjiao lose her composure, the subordinates looked at each other. Could it be that Lu Ming had really given her a battle formation that was stronger than the divine dragon battle formation? Nguyen Tianjiao sank her consciousness into the jade token and studied it carefully as though she was entranced. After a while, she was overjoyed and said, "Train the new battle formation immediately." After saying that, he rushed to the battlefield in a hurry. The four generals followed him with a confused look on their faces. In the following days, Nguyen Tianjiao focused on training the new battle formation. If there was anything she did not understand, she would run to Lu Ming to ask him. In just over 10 days, the battle formation training had reached a considerable scale. Roar! The army gathered and activated the true dragon battle formation. A true dragon was formed and roared at the sky. Its might was many times stronger than the divine dragon from before. At this time, Nguyen Tianjiao and her subordinates were full of admiration for Lu Ming. No one suspected that Lu Ming was a spy. How could a spy possibly give them such a brilliant battle formation to cultivate? Nguyen Tianjiao was even more relieved that her intuition was right. Lu Ming was not an ordinary person. Chapter 1941. During this period of time, Yen Song was extremely depressed and furious. In Yen Song's tent, he slammed his palm heavily on the table. The terrifying force of his palm smashed the table into pieces. "Damned bitch!" Yen Song roared. His face was extremely ferocious and filled with murderous intent. During this period of time, every time he looked for Nguyen Tianjiao, he was stopped by Nguyen Tianjiao's subordinates. They said that Nguyen Tianjiao had to train the army and had no time. However, Yen Song had received news that Nguyen Tianjiao was hanging out with Lu Ming every day. "Young master, it seems that Nguyen Tianjiao is mesmerized by Lu Ming. I wonder what that kid did to Nguyen Tianjiao." "That's right. It's all because of Lu Ming. When I first saw him, I knew that he wasn't a good person. If not for that kid, Nguyen Tianjiao might have already thrown himself into young master's arms." Yen Song's subordinates added fuel to the fire, making Yen Song even angrier. His murderous intent was like a knife. "That kid must die," Yen Song said coldly. He continued, "I asked you to keep an eye on that kid. Where is he now?" "Young master, we just received news that the kid has returned to his tent." One of them replied. "Very good. Let's go. I want that kid to die miserably. Yen Song's eyes revealed a sinister look. He led a few of his subordinates and walked toward Lu Ming's tent. Lu Ming was cultivating in the tent when a loud roar came from outside. Lu Ming, get out here. A voice filled with murderous intent came, making Lu Ming frown. He knew that it was Yen Song's voice. A sharp light flashed in Lu Ming's eyes. He got up and walked out of the tent. He saw Yen Song and a few of his subordinates looking coldly at Lu Ming. Some members of the Divine Wirm army were alarmed and gathered around to watch. However, Yen Song's status was not to be underestimated. No one dared to come over and speak. Why are you looking for me? Lu Ming glanced at Lu Ming indifferently. Kid, I've already given you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. Now, you dare to snatch my woman? You're courting death. Yen Song said coldly. You gave me a chance. Lu Ming couldn't help but shake his head. At that time, who would give who a chance? Lowly dog, why don't you take a piss and take a good look at yourself? How dare you go against me? A dog like you should kneel in front of me and beg for mercy. Do you understand? Kill him. Yen Song shouted and waved his hand. Bang! Bang! The two half-saint martial artists stepped forward and unleashed their powerful auras. They were about to attack Lu Ming. Stop, young Master Yen. Lu Ming is the marshal's friend. If the marshal finds out that you're treating Lu Ming like this, I'm afraid you won't be able to explain yourself. Right then, a burly man rushed over and shouted. He was the deputy general of the Divine Flood Dragon Army. He had become quite familiar with Lu Ming during this period of time. Scram! Yen Song shouted angrily and slapped the big man. The big man didn't dare to block and was slapped in the face, causing him to stumble backwards. Who do you think you are? I don't need you to comment on my actions. If you continue to spout nonsense, I'll kill you too. Yen Song glanced coldly at the big man, causing his face to turn pale. Oh no, Yen Song wants to kill Lu Ming. Hurry up and inform the marshal. Some people in the surroundings whispered. Then, someone quickly left to inform Nguyen Tianjiao. I'll return this slap to you tenfold. Lu Ming looked at Yen Song and his face turned cold. Huh, you're boasting shamelessly. Attack! Yen Song laughed. Kid, kneel down first. The two half-saints rushed towards Lu Ming from the left and right. They waved their hands and grabbed Lu Ming. They wanted to make Lu Ming kneel in front of Yen Song before killing him. Since you like to kneel, then, kneel. Lu Ming used the soul illusion technique on the last two words. At this moment, Lu Ming seemed to have turned into a demon god in the eyes of the two half-saints. He ruled the world and had absolute control over life and death. The terrifying aura almost scared the two out of their wits. Their bodies didn't seem to listen to them. With a plop, they knelt in front of Lu Ming. This, Yen Song was dumbfounded. His other two subordinates were also dumbfounded. The people of the Divine Flood Dragon Army were also stunned. What's going on? Why did the two half-saints of Yen Song suddenly kneel in front of Lu Ming? Lu Ming didn't even make a move. He only said a few words and knelt down. These two half-saints were the closest to being a saint. Could it be that Lu Ming was a saint? The crowd guessed. It seems like your two subordinates know that they were wrong and knelt down to beg for mercy. As for you, if you don't kneel down, I might consider sparing you this time. Lu Ming looked at Yen Song indifferently. You son of a bitch, how dare you fight back? You are indeed a spy. Attack and kill him. Yen Song came to his senses and roared furiously. Kill. Beside Yen Song, an old man stepped out and released a terrifying aura. This old man was a bright saint initial success. In the country of bright fire, he was a famous top expert. The old man's aura made many people's faces change drastically. This was a saint, the top expert in the country of brightness. A half-saint couldn't be compared to him. Why isn't the marshal here yet? Some people were anxious and worried about Lu Ming. Although Lu Ming had used some unknown method to make the two half-sages kneel down, the difference between a sage and a half-sage was too great. The old man's aura became stronger and stronger, pressing towards Lu Ming. However, Lu Ming still stood there, motionless, as if he didn't see the old man. Deliberately mystifying things. Go to hell. The old man's eyes were ferocious. His hand was like a knife, grabbing towards Lu Ming. Kneel down. At this moment, Lu Ming spoke again. Although his voice wasn't loud, it was like thunder in the old man's ears. It was as if a god was shouting in his ears. At this moment, his soul was under terrifying pressure. He couldn't summon any strength in his body. Plop. Like the previous two half-saints, he knelt down in front of Lu Ming. The scene suddenly quieted down. At this moment, time and space froze. Everyone was dumbfounded. They looked coldly at Lu Ming and then at the old man. A saint had knelt down in front of Lu Ming. A moment ago, he was murderous and wanted to kill Lu Ming. The next moment, he knelt in front of Lu Ming. What was going on? Many people found that they couldn't wrap their heads around it. They had never seen such a thing before. A Saint Realm expert had knelt down without even fighting. What kind of trick was this? Yen Song was also stunned. His mouth was opened so wide that he could swallow a dead mouse. His throat seemed to be stuck and he couldn't make a sound for a long time. It seems that your subordinates are very sensible. They realized their mistakes and knelt down to admit their mistakes. Now, why don't you kneel down? Chapter 1942. When Lu Ming spoke, Yen Song reacted as if he had just woken up from a dream. You son of a bitch. What kind of sorcery did you use? How dare you make the sage of the country of light kneel down? You're so bold. Just you wait. This isn't over. Then, Yen Song turned around and was about to leave. Lu Ming was too strange. He could make an expert of the Saint State kneel down. He felt scared and wanted to return to the capital to report to his father. Then, he would send experts to take revenge. Did I allow you to leave? Lu Ming's indifferent voice sounded. He moved and appeared in front of Yen Song. His cold, knife-like gaze swept toward Yen Song, causing Yen Song's expression to change drastically. He could not help but take a few steps back. What do you want? Yen Song shouted. Kneel down and slap your own mouth. Lu Ming said indifferently. How dare you? Boy, how dare you touch me? Do you know the consequences? Yen Song shouted. Oh, what consequences? Lu Ming said playfully. Son of a bitch, listen carefully. My father is the state preceptor and my sister is His Majesty's favorite concubine. How dare you touch me? I'll make sure you die without a burial place and exterminate your 9 generations. Yen Song shouted and stared coldly at Lu Ming. He didn't believe that Lu Ming dared to touch him. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Lu Ming slapped him. The slap was unbelievably fast. Yen Song couldn't dodge it at all. Slap. The crisp sound of the slap echoed in all directions. Yen Song flew out and spun dozens of times in the air. Then, he fell heavily on the ground. Half of his face was swollen and all his teeth were knocked out by Lu Ming. Yen Song was stunned. The others were also stunned. Lu Ming really dared to hit Yen Song. His guts were really big. Ah, son of a bitch, how dare you hit me? I want you dead. I'll skin you alive. Yen Song roared hysterically. Just now, he had come over murderously, wanting to kill Lu Ming. In the end, his subordinates had inexplicably knelt in front of Lu Ming. Now, Lu Ming had actually dared to slap him. This was a great humiliation. He wished he could chop Lu Ming into pieces. Slap him. Lu Ming said coldly as he slapped the air. A palm condensed from Saint Power was formed and slapped Yen Song's face. Yen Song's body flew out again and spun a few times in the air. Under the control of Lu Ming's force, he fell to the ground and knelt there. I just said that I want you to pay me back tenfold. You slapped me once, so I'll slap you 10 times. Lu Ming said coldly. He waved his hand again and delivered another 10 slaps. After 10 consecutive slaps, Yen Song's face had turned into a pig's head. His face was swollen beyond recognition. I'm sorry, I gave you 2 more slaps. Lu Ming curled his lips. In addition to the previous 2 slaps, there were a total of 12 slaps. Pfft! Yen Song was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. This was too much. Swoosh! At this moment, a ray of light flew over from afar and landed on the ground. It was Ruan Tianjiao. She rushed over as soon as she received the news. When she saw the scene, she was speechless. Yen Song dared to hit Lu Ming. He was asking for it. She rushed over not because she was worried about Lu Ming, but because she was afraid that Lu Ming would kill Yen Song in a fit of anger. Yen Song was the son of the state preceptor after all. If he died, there would be trouble. Tianjiao, you came at the right time. Lu Ming is a spy. How dare he hit an expert from our bright flame country? Get your men to take him down. Cripple his cultivation and bring him back for interrogation. Yen Song screamed hysterically when he saw Ruan Tianjiao. Ruan Tianjiao shook her head secretly. Yen Song was still stubborn. Yen Song, I've told you long ago that Lu Ming is my guest and not a spy. Furthermore, you were the one who started this. You only have yourself to blame. Ruan Tianjiao said plainly. What? What did you say? I asked for it. Ruan Tianjiao, you adulterous couple. Just you wait. Yen Song was furious. He left behind a few harsh words and staggered away. Get lost. Then, Lu Ming waved his hand and a few of Yen Song's subordinates flew out and landed heavily on the ground. They got up in a sorry state and ran away. Lu Ming, thank you for not killing Yen Song. Ruan Tianjiao cupped her fists at Lu Ming. She knew that Lu Ming did not kill Yen Song mostly because of her. Lu Ming smiled and said, I didn't implicate you by hitting Yen Song, did I? No, I'm one of the 5 marshals of Bright Fire Country. Yen Song can't do anything to me. Ruan Tianjiao shook her head. The matter was over just like that. After that, Ruan Tianjiao continued to train the army while Lu Ming cultivated every day. After more than 10 days, he went to the capital with Ruan Tianjiao. In the blink of an eye, 7 days had passed. On this day, someone from the capital came with an imperial edict from the emperor. Ruan Tianjiao led his men to receive the edict. The person who came to deliver the edict was a skinny old man. He squinted his eyes and smiled. Congratulations, Marshal Ruan Tianjiao. His Majesty has decreed that you will be betrothed to young Master Yen Song. The wedding will take place soon. What? Those words were like a bolt from the blue. It stunned Ruan Tianjiao and her subordinates. The emperor betrothed Ruan Tianjiao to Yen Song? How was that possible? Super Overlord, are you sure you're not mistaken? I'm a marshal. Why would His Majesty grant a marriage so easily? Ruan Tianjiao asked. Chief's face darkened. His Majesty has issued the edict himself and announced it to the world. How can it be wrong? Damn it, it must be Yen Song. What did he say to His Majesty? It's most likely his sister, concubine Qing. She bewitched His Majesty. Several of Ruan Tianjiao's subordinates were furious. Needless to say, it must be Yan Song's doing. Yan Song pursued Ruan Tianjiao, but Ruan Tianjiao never treated Yan Song well. 7 days ago, Yan Song was taught a lesson by Lu Ming. He must have harbored a grudge. After returning to the capital, he must have told the emperor something. Otherwise, why would the emperor suddenly grant a marriage? Marshal Ruan Tianjiao, accept the edict and thank His Majesty for his kindness. The supergiant said coldly. Chief, please go back. Please forgive me for not accepting the edict. Ruan Tianjiao said with a sullen face. What? You're not accepting the edict? Ruan Tianjiao, are you going to defy the edict? Chief scolded coldly. So what if I defy the edict? That fatuous emperor is getting muddle-headed. One of the subordinates said coldly. How dare you insult His Majesty? That's a capital offense. Chief pointed at the subordinate and shouted. I think you'll be the first to die. The subordinate emitted a cold murderous intent as he looked at Chief. Chief shuddered. His face turned pale and cold sweat broke out all over his body. If Ruan Tianjiao rebelled in anger and killed him, he would have died in vain. Chief, please go back. I won't accept the edict. I'll return to the capital personally and ask His Majesty. Chapter 1943. I will leave tomorrow and return to the capital. I will leave the divine Wyrm army to you all. Ruan Tianjiao looked at his subordinates. Marshal, why don't we just rebel? One of the subordinates said. That's right. His Majesty is muddle-headed and infatuated with concubine Qing. He doesn't care about the state affairs and all the power is controlled by the Grand Tutor. Why don't we just rebel and replace him? Marshal, you are the goddess of war and have contributed greatly to the Bright Flame country. If you replace him, the people will definitely welcome you. A few of the subordinates spoke one after another, advising Ruan Tianjiao to rebel and kill his way to the capital. Shut up. Ruan Tianjiao shouted and everyone shut up. My Ruan family has been loyal for generations. How can we rebel? In the future, don't mention such things again. Otherwise, we will punish you according to military law. Ruan Tianjiao shouted. His gaze was like lightning, causing the subordinates' faces to turn ugly. Marshal, we will go to the capital with you tomorrow. If the Yen family is plotting something, we can take care of each other. One of the subordinates said. No need. Your mission is to oversee the divine Wyrm army. I have the ability to protect myself. Ruan Tianjiao said. Tomorrow, I will go with you. A voice could be heard. It was Lu Ming who was walking over. Of course, Lu Ming had seen everything that had happened just now. He was going to the capital anyway and could go with Ruan Tianjiao. Ruan Tianjiao looked at Lu Ming and nodded his head. The next day, Lu Ming and Ruan Tianjiao rode on a mutated beast and headed to the capital of the Bright Flame country. The island was vast. However, the mutated beasts they rode were fast like the wind. In 3 days, they arrived at the capital of the Bright Flame country. On the way, Ruan Tianjiao explained the situation of the Bright Flame country. Ever since the emperor of the Bright Flame country was infatuated with concubine Qing, he had neglected the state affairs and the power was controlled by the Grand Tutor. The Grand Tutor had plundered all the treasures in the Bright Flame country for his own cultivation, causing the people to live in poverty and the country's power to decline day by day. Currently, the Grand Tutor was the most powerful person in the Bright Flame country. The capital of the Bright Fire Nation was very big and lively. However, Lu Ming had seen the prosperity of the Celestial City. Compared to the Celestial City, the Bright Fire Nation was like a village in the wilderness. The two of them rode their strange beasts into the capital and headed towards the imperial palace. Greetings, Marshal Tian Jiao. Greetings, Heavenly Dragon War Goddess. The moment they entered the capital, the people who saw Nguyen Tianjiao bowed to him. It seems that you are very loved by the people. Lu Ming smiled and transmitted his voice to Nguyen Tianjiao. I'm just doing my duty, Nguyen Tianjiao said. He then nodded at the crowd and continued forward. Sigh, Marshal Tian Jiao is such a peerless talent, yet she's actually going to marry that bastard Yen Song. What a pity. Isn't that so? But now that the Yen family is so powerful that even His Majesty listens to them, what can we do? It's just a pity for Marshal Tian Jiao. Lu Ming heard the sighs and discussions of the commoners. Not long after, they arrived in front of a series of palaces. This was the Imperial Palace. However, they were blocked outside the Imperial Palace. Marshal Tian Jiao, please forgive us. His Majesty has ordered that he won't see anyone for the next 2 days. A general guarding the gate cupped his fist and said. Go and inform him that I'm back. Nguyen Tianjiao said with a frown. His Majesty has said that if Marshal Tian Jiao is back, there's no need to inform him. In 3 days, His Majesty will prepare a banquet to welcome you back. Marshal, come back in 3 days. The general guarding the gate said. Nguyen Tianjiao frowned and then left the imperial palace with Lu Ming without saying anything else. Not long after, they arrived in front of a mansion with the words Nguyen Mansion written on it. This was Nguyen Tianjiao's mansion in the capital. They were temporarily staying in the Nguyen family. After arranging a room for Lu Ming, Nguyen Tianjiao left the Nguyen family. No one knew where he went. A day later, Nguyen Tianjiao returned. Lu Ming, I've brought you the information you wanted about the ancient ruins. Nguyen Tianjiao found Lu Ming and handed a jade token to Lu Ming. Lu Ming took it and scanned it with his spiritual consciousness. Indeed, he found some ancient ruins of the 10,000 Seas realm recorded in it. Tianjiao, where is the most famous ruin in the 10,000 Seas realm? After looking at it for a while, Lu Ming asked. Of course it's the sacred mountain of time. Legend has it that the sacred mountain of time has existed for countless years. It was left behind by an immortal. Nguyen Tianjiao said. An immortal. Lu Ming muttered. During this period, he had a deeper understanding of the martial arts cultivation in the 10,000 Seas realm and the martial arts realms. Some of the realms and titles in the 10,000 Seas realm were the same as in the outside world. They went all the way to Martial Emperor, then Bright Sage, Supreme Sage, and Paragon Sage. However, there were changes after reaching Paragon Sage. Those above Paragon Sage were called Sage Emperors in the 10,000 Seas realm. Lu Ming speculated that Sage Emperors were equivalent to Boundary Emperors in the outside world. According to the ancient records and legends in the Bright Flame country, Sage Emperors were the highest realm in this world. Above that was Immortal. Immortal had an endless lifespan and was immortal. However, it was a legend in the 10,000 Seas realm. It had never appeared before. Lu Ming speculated that the immortal in the 10,000 Seas realm was the Martial Emperor in the outside world. The sacred mountain of time was left behind by an immortal. Could it be the Heavenly Emperor? Lu Ming's eyes lit up. He had to go to the sacred mountain of time. It might have something to do with the Heavenly Emperor. How can I go to the sacred mountain of time? Lu Ming asked. I don't know. Nguyen Tianjiao shook his head and said, Legend has it that the sacred mountain of time is on the sacred island of time. However, no one can find the sacred island of time. No one has been there before. Lu Ming frowned. Of course. Every 3 years, the sacred island of time will send out an envoy to bring a group of people to the sacred island of time to cultivate. It is said that the sacred island of time has unique cultivation conditions. It is the sacred island of martial arts that countless people in the 10,000 Seas realm yearn for. The next time we go to the sacred island of time is not far away. Soon, the 9 nations of sea will hold an alliance to select the people who will go to the sacred island of time. The Bright Flame country will also participate. Lu Ming, if you want to go to the sacred island of time, that will be your chance. Nguyen Tianjiao explained. The 9 Nations Alliance? Lu Ming's eyes flashed. He had to go to the sacred mountain of time. Lu Ming speculated that the experts who came from the outside world would probably go to the sacred mountain of time. After all, it was suspected to be left behind by the heavenly emperor. If there were any treasures, they would be priceless. In a flash, 3 days had passed. 3 days later, Lu Ming and Nguyen Tianjiao went to the palace. This time, someone welcomed them into the palace and they came to an open space. This place was beautiful and the environment was very elegant. At this time, there were already some banquets on both sides of the place. When Lu Ming and Nguyen Tianjiao arrived, they saw that there were already many people. When Lu Ming arrived, he felt a cold gaze on him. Lu Ming followed the gaze and saw Yen Song staring at Lu Ming with a murderous look. Chapter 1944. Beside Yen Song was a skinny old man. His hair was white and he was dressed in luxurious clothes. He looked similar to Yen Song. Lu Ming guessed that this person should be the Grand Tutor. The Grand Tutor squinted his eyes and smiled faintly. It was hard to tell what he was thinking and he gave off a scheming vibe. In the middle seat, there were 2 people. One of them was an old man with white hair. He was dressed in a dragon robe and had a jade crown on his head. He should be the monarch of Bright Flame country. Beside the king of Light Fire country, there was a beautiful lady. She looked to be in her 20s. Her figure was graceful and her eyes were like silk. She was extremely charming and enchanting. This person should be Yen Song's sister, Imperial Concubine Qing. In other seats, there were other people with extraordinary auras. They should be the upper echelons of Bright Flame country. Nguyen Tianjiao strode forward and bowed to the monarch of Bright Flame country. Greetings, Your Majesty. Tianjiao is back. There's no need for formalities. Please take a seat. The monarch of Bright Flame country laughed. Thank you, Your Majesty. Nguyen Tianjiao said. After which, he walked to a row of seats with Lu Ming and sat down. How dare you, Lu Ming? Who do you think you are? What right do you have to sit there? Lu Ming had just sat down when Yen Song slammed the table and stood up. He looked at Lu Ming coldly. Lu Ming smirked. He was going to make things difficult for him so soon. Get up. Don't you know where you are? Who are you sitting here? With your status, do you have the right to sit here? Get up and scram to the side. Yen Song chided again. However, Lu Ming acted as though he didn't hear him. He picked up the wine cup on the table and took a sip. Good wine. It's really good wine. It's a pity that a wild dog is barking and ruining the mood. You. How dare you? Yen Song was enraged. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Do you think you're noble? Why did you kneel before me? Lu Ming laughed disdainfully. Shut up. Men, remove this person's seat. Yen Song shouted. Immediately, someone stepped forward to remove Lu Ming's seat. The king of Bright Flame country, Imperial Concubine Qing, the Imperial Tutor, and the rest of the people looked on indifferently as though they were watching a good show. Scram! At that moment, Nguyen Tianjiao let out a delicate roar and a murderous aura emanated from her. The bodyguard, who was about to remove Lu Ming's seat, froze in place. Lu Ming is my friend. If you want to remove Lu Ming's position, then remove mine as well. Nguyen Tianjiao shouted. The The guard stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. Yuan Tianjiao's status was incomparable to Lu Ming's. She was the marshal of the divine Wirm army and the goddess of war of the bright fire country. How could he dare to remove Yuan Tianjiao from her position? Retreat? Why aren't we retreating? Yuan Tianjiao stared at the guard with a threatening gaze. The guard broke out in cold sweat and looked at Yen Song, the Grand Preceptor, and the others for help. Damn it! Yen Song was infuriated and jealous. Lu Ming did not know what medicine he had fed Yuan Tianjiao, but Yuan Tianjiao had been protecting Lu Ming. All right, you may leave. Since this young man is a friend of the marshal, he can naturally sit here. At that moment the imperial tutor spoke. The guard heaved a sigh of relief, bowed, and retreated as though he had been pardoned. Tianjiao, you've returned just in time. I've already granted you a marriage and the date has been set. You've returned just in time to marry Yen Song. The king of Bright Flame Country spoke. Your Majesty, I've returned for this matter. Feelings can't be forced. I have no feelings for Yen Song. I hope your Majesty can retract your order. Yuan Tianjiao stood up and bowed to the king of Bright Flame Country. How dare you? Imperial concubine Qing, who was standing beside the king of Bright Flame Country, shouted coldly, the monarch's words are not a joke. Since your Majesty has already given the order, how can you retract it? Yuan Tianjiao, do you want your Majesty to be a man who goes back on his words? I wouldn't dare. Yuan Tianjiao cupped her fists and said, if it's anything else, I'll definitely honor it. If you ask me to go into battle to kill the enemy, I won't even frown. However, I can't accept this order. Tianjiao, imperial concubine Qing has also said that the monarch's words are not a joke. Moreover, Yen Song is not bad and is a good match for you. This matter is settled then. The king of Bright Flame Country waved his hand and said in an unquestionable tone. Yuan Tianjiao was in disbelief. She did not expect the king of Bright Flame Country to marry her to Yen Song so hastily without her consent. Although the king of Bright Flame Country in the past was muddle-headed, he would not do this. Previously, your Majesty has already announced to the world that the two of you will be married in half a month. This matter is settled then. During this period, Marshal Tianjiao shall stay in the palace. The imperial tutor spoke as though the matter had been settled. Yuan Tianjiao shook her head. She was extremely disappointed in the king of Bright Flame Country. Initially, she came back to ask the king of Bright Flame Country for an explanation and for the king of Bright Flame Country to retract his order. However, she now realized that the king of Bright Flame Country was completely on the imperial tutor's side. Lu Ming did not say anything. A strange light flashed in his eyes as he secretly sized up the king of Bright Flame Country. He had discovered something interesting. Tianjiao, I'm afraid the king of Bright Flame Country won't listen to you. Imperial concubine Qing is good at seduction techniques. The king of Bright Flame Country has already fallen for her seduction techniques and will listen to everything she says. Lu Ming transmitted his voice to Yuan Tianjiao. What? Yuan Tianjiao was stunned at first. Then, she flew into a rage and stood up abruptly. A powerful aura spread out as she glared at the imperial tutor and shouted, Yan Kuei and Yan Ling, how dare you use seduction techniques to bewitch His Majesty? As soon as she said that, the expressions of imperial concubine Qing, the imperial tutor, Yen Song, and the others changed drastically. Yuan Tianjiao, what nonsense are you talking about? Yen Song roared. You know very well whether I'm talking nonsense or not. Yan Kuei and Yan Ling, you dare to plot against His Majesty and control him from the shadows. No wonder His Majesty doesn't care about the affairs of the imperial court and gave you all the power. I'm going to announce this to the world. Lu Ming, let's go. Having said that, Yuan Tianjiao strode out. Stop him. The imperial tutor's face was gloomy. With a wave of his hand, 4 figures flashed and surrounded Lu Ming and Ruan Tianjiao. Each of them exuded a powerful aura. Perfect bright sage realm. Lu Ming did not need to look to know that the 4 of them were at the perfect bright sage realm and were not any weaker than Ruan Tianjiao. The 4 of you are marshals. Are you willing to give in to the imperial tutor? Ruan Tianjiao spoke with a solemn expression. The 4 of them were on par with her. The other 4 marshals of Bright Fire Country had strong combat strength. They were all in the great circle of the Bright Sage realm. Each of their combat strength was not much weaker than hers. If the 4 of them joined forces, she would definitely be no match for them. Ruan Tianjiao, you disobeyed the imperial decree. You are indeed ambitious and want to rebel. The imperial tutor spoke plainly and pinned a serious crime on Ruan Tianjiao. Nonsense. Chapter 1945. The imperial advisor sneered and said, "You didn't even listen to His Majesty's orders and disobeyed the edict. If this isn't rebellion, what is it? Moreover, I've already received news that you secretly colluded with Luoshui nation and attempted to overthrow the Bright Flame nation. You deserve to die." Colluding with Luoshui nation? Nonsense. Who would believe your one-sided story? Ruan Tianjiao shouted. If you want evidence, I'll give it to you. Come out. The imperial advisor's cold voice was heard. Then, a burly man in his 30s walked out. Greetings, Your Majesty. Greetings, Imperial Advisor. The burly man bowed to the king and the imperial advisor. Wang Xing, why are you here? Ruan Tianjiao was very surprised because Wang Xing was her bodyguard who had followed her for many years. However, she did not allow Wang Xing to come to the capital. Shouldn't Wang Xing be with the Divine Wirm army? Ruan Tianjiao had a bad feeling in his heart. Wang Xing, tell me everything you know. The imperial advisor said. Wang Xing nodded and said, Ruan Tianjiao has indeed colluded with Luoshui nation and has been plotting secretly. When the time comes, he will secretly rebel and proclaim himself the emperor. However, I'm a citizen of the Bright Flame nation and I'm only loyal to His Majesty. How can I let such a thing happen? Today, I'll reveal Ruan Tianjiao's wild ambition to the public. Wang Xing's voice spread throughout the place. Wang Xing, how dare you slander me? Ruan Tianjiao shouted, trembling with anger. It was obvious that Wang Xing had been bribed by the imperial advisor and had joined forces with the imperial advisor to frame her. However, Wang Xing was her bodyguard. Many people might believe what he said. Ruan Tianjiao, your conspiracy has been exposed. Why don't you surrender? However, since Yen Song pleaded for you, I'll spare your life. As long as you destroy your cultivation, marry Yen Song, and hand over your military power, I won't announce your rebellion to the world. I'll protect your innocence. The imperial advisor said coldly as if he had the pearl of wisdom in his hand. For this matter, he had already set up a plan. Everything was perfect and Ruan Tianjiao had no room to resist. There was only one outcome. That was to destroy her cultivation, hand over her military power, and marry his son Yen Song. Yen Song had a smug look in his eyes as he looked coldly at Nguyen Tianjiao and Lu Ming. A slut and a dog dares to fight with me? You're simply courting death. Yen Song laughed heartily, feeling extremely pleased with himself. Especially when he looked at Nguyen Tianjiao's handsome face and perfect figure, his heart burned with passion. He wanted nothing more than to take Nguyen Tianjiao for himself. However, it will be soon, he told himself. You, despicable. Nguyen Tianjiao was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She understood that not only did the imperial advisor want Yen Song to marry her, but he also wanted to take away her military power. At that moment, the other 4 great marshals had already submitted to the imperial tutor. If the Divine Dragon army was also in his hands, then the Bright Fire country would really become the Imperial Tutor's world and no one would be able to stop him. Nguyen Tianjiao cast her gaze at the monarch, but the monarch did not even look at her. All he did was chuckle and drink with concubine Qing. Nguyen Tianjiao was utterly disappointed. And? At this moment, Lu Ming's calm voice could be heard. What? The imperial advisor, Yen Song, and the rest were stunned. They did not understand what Lu Ming meant. If you're not talking, then you're done. Since you're done, it's my turn to speak. Lu Ming looked around with a faint smile on his face and said, today's incident is like this. The imperial advisor, Yen Song, and concubine Qing led a rebellion and killed the monarch with the intention of replacing him. Then, Marshal Nguyen Tianjiao arrived with his men and killed the rebels to avenge the monarch. In the end, Nguyen Tianjiao became the empress of the Bright Fire country with the support of the people. What? The imperial advisor, Yen Song, concubine Qing, and the rest of the people present, including Nguyen Tianjiao, were all dumbfounded. It took them a while to react. Ha ha ha, this brat must have been scared out of his wits when he was about to die. Yen Song laughed until tears rolled down his cheeks. The imperial advisor, concubine Qing, and the rest laughed too. Their laughter was filled with contempt. Lu Ming meant to kill all of them and let Nguyen Tianjiao sit on the throne of the empress. How was that possible? What a lunatic. The imperial advisor and the rest shook their heads. Lu Ming did not seem to notice the expressions of the imperial advisor and the rest. Instead, he looked at Nguyen Tianjiao and said, Tianjiao, what do you think of my idea? Nguyen Tianjiao was stunned and could not react in time. I understand. Since you can't do it, let me do it. Lu Ming smiled faintly. He then stood up and walked toward Yen Song. This guy is crazy. Kill him. Yen Song shouted. Brat, you're crazy. Die. One of the marshals shouted and took a step forward. The ground rumbled as his burly body rushed towards Lu Ming. He was like a mountain crashing down on Lu Ming with a terrifying aura. However, Lu Ming looked calm as if he did not see the marshal making a move. He allowed the attack to come. Be careful. Nguyen Tianjiao exclaimed. However, it was too late for him to save Nguyen Tianjiao. Brat, go to hell. Yen Song roared in his heart. His eyes were full of pride. Trying to fight with him for a woman? You're courting death. At this moment, Lu Ming looked at the marshal. 2 rays of black light flashed across his eyes. Then, everyone saw the marshal's body tremble and fall to the ground with a plop. He was no longer breathing. Dead. The marshal died suddenly and silently. No one saw how the marshal died and no one saw how Lu Ming attacked. The scene suddenly quietened down. The imperial advisor's eyes narrowed slightly and a cold light flashed in them. How dare you kill the marshal of an army? If this is not a rebellion, what is it? Let's attack together and kill this person. Concubine Qing shouted beside the king. Boom! 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 The other 3 marshals attacked at the same time. The 3 of them were in the Great Sage realm. When they attacked together, their momentum was terrifying. They wanted to kill Lu Ming in one fell swoop. Die! Lu Ming didn't even look at the 3 marshals. His gaze was fixed on Yen Song as he uttered a word. The power of the divine sword art was released along with his voice and rushed into the bodies of the 3 marshals. The 3 marshals were the same as the previous marshal. Their bodies trembled slightly and their souls were destroyed by Lu Ming. Their bodies fell to the ground softly and there was no longer any breath left. Dead, they were dead again. The 4 marshals, the top experts of the Bright Fire country, were all dead in an instant. No one saw how they died. There was a series of gasps at the scene. They only heard Lu Ming say the word die, and the three marshals were dead. This was too terrifying. What kind of supernatural power was this? It was as if Lu Ming was the Grim Reaper. Whoever he wanted to kill would die. Yen Song's face changed and turned as pale as a sheet. His eyes were filled with fear. The imperial advisor and concubine Qing's faces also changed and became extremely solemn. Chapter 1946. As for Wan Tianjiao, she was dumbfounded and in disbelief. The cultivation of the four marshals was on par with her, but her spiritual body was slightly higher. In terms of combat strength, she was ranked first among the 5 marshals, but she wasn't much stronger. For such experts had died in front of Lu Ming in an instant. What cultivation did Lu Ming have? Could Lu Ming be an expert of the Great Sage realm? In the past, when she first met Lu Ming, although she felt that Lu Ming was extraordinary, she also felt that Lu Ming was at most on par with her. She didn't expect Lu Ming to kill the 4 top experts silently. Bam! Bam! After Lu Ming killed the 4 marshals, he continued to move forward and walked towards Yen Song. Every step he took seemed to be knocking on Yen Song's heart, causing his heart to tremble. The fear in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. Kill him. Let's kill him together. Yen Song screamed hysterically. This person is rebelling and wants to harm His Majesty. Quick, kill him. Concubine Qing also shouted. Swoosh. 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 Several figures rushed out from behind the monarch and the imperial advisor. These people's auras were very powerful. Many of them were in the Great Sage realm and were not weaker than the 4 marshals. These people were the experts nurtured by the imperial family and the imperial advisor. This was their true strength. Many experts joined forces and intertwined their power like an inescapable net, enveloping Lu Ming. Kill! At this moment, Lu Ming shouted again. The sound waves spread out and rushed in all directions. The people who were attacking him from all directions were the same as the 4 marshals. Their bodies trembled and then they fell to the ground and stopped breathing. This time, even the imperial preceptor's face changed and turned pale. Yen Song and concubine Qing were completely terrified. Demon, you're a demon. Yen Song screamed hysterically. Lu Ming had only spat out a single word, and so many experts had died in an instant. This was beyond his comprehension. At this moment, Lu Ming was a demon in his eyes. Lu Ming's eyes were cold as he continued to walk towards Yen Song. Yen Song's body began to tremble in fear. He kept retreating as he shouted, "Father, Father, save me. He can't touch you." The imperial preceptor coldly spoke. After which, a terrifying aura erupted from his body. This aura was much stronger than any of the auras from before. Great Saint Stage. Yen Kuei, you've broken through to the Great Saint Stage. Nguyen Tianjiao shouted in disbelief. The Grand Preceptor had already broken through to the Great Saint realm and was known as the #1 expert in the Bright Fire country. She couldn't help but worry for Lu Ming. However, Lu Ming's expression didn't change at all. It was as if the cultivation of the Great Sage realm couldn't cause any ripples in Lu Ming's heart. Brothers Jian, let's attack together. The State Preceptor suddenly spoke. I didn't expect the Bright Flame country to have such a character. Very well, it's safer to attack together. An old voice sounded behind the State Preceptor. Then, 2 old men stepped out and stood beside the State Preceptor. Boom! Boom! Then, a terrifying aura erupted from the 2 old men. The terrifying aura swept through the clouds and changed the color of the sky. These 2 old men also had the cultivation of the Great Sage realm. Like the State Preceptor, they were both in the lesser Great Sage realm. At the same time, Two long swords like ripples were suspended above the two old men's heads. The twin sword saints of the Luoshui country. You're the unparalleled sword saints of the Luoshui country. Yan Kuei, it turns out that you're the one who colluded with the Luoshui country. Nguyen Tianjiao shouted in shock. The unparalleled sword saints of the Luoshui country were the most terrifying experts in the country. Two lesser Great Sage Realm experts had appeared beside the State Preceptor. Needless to say, the State Preceptor had secretly colluded with the Luoshui country. He was the real traitor. So what if I know? Today, all of you will die. The State Preceptor said coldly. Kill, father, kill this kid. No, cripple him first. I want him to suffer a fate worse than death. Yen Song was stunned at first. Obviously, he did not expect the State Preceptor's cultivation to have reached the Great Sage Realm. Moreover, the unparalleled sword saint of the Luoshui country was beside him. But immediately, he was ecstatic and shouted in ecstasy. 3 great sages. Lu Ming was dead for sure, no matter what tricks he had up his sleeves. The Great Sage Realm was a legend in the Bright Flame country. Is this your trump card? Lu Ming did not even look at Yen Song. He said indifferently. Then, he stretched out a hand and pressed against the void. Boom! In the sky, a huge hand suddenly appeared. It covered the sky and pressed down on the State Preceptor and the unparalleled sword saint of the Luoshui country. The terrifying aura spread out in all directions. The State Preceptor and the unparalleled sword saint of the Luoshui country turned pale. They felt that the aura was not something they could resist. At this moment, they wanted to escape. But they found that the space around them had solidified. They could not escape at all. Yen Song and Imperial concubine Qing were completely stunned. They stared blankly at the godlike hand in the sky. Their bodies trembled like sieves. This kind of power made them feel hopeless. Block it! The State Preceptor roared. He was unwilling to give up. He still wanted to resist. He formed a seal with both hands and struck out a terrifying palm print. At the same time, the unparalleled sword saint of the Luoshui country also attacked. 2 sword lights rushed up to the sky like a river. However, the lesser Great Sage Realm was no different from an ant in the hands of Lu Ming. Under the pressure of the huge hand, the attacks of the 3 collapsed instantly. Finally, the huge hand covered the 3 of them and slammed them to the ground. Boom! The earth rumbled. Smoke and dust filled the air. Gravel flew everywhere. After a while, the smoke and dust disappeared. Everyone saw a huge palm print on the ground. The State Preceptor and the unparalleled sword saint of the Luoshui country were lying in the palm print like dead dogs, vomiting blood. Their aura was extremely weak. They were like 3 ordinary people. Lu Ming had crippled their cultivation with that blow. The State Preceptor's eyes were full of unwillingness and despair. It's over. He knew that everything was over. Ah! Yen Song suddenly screamed. His body turned into a rainbow light and fled into the distance. He did not care about the State Preceptor and the others and wanted to escape alone. However, Lu Ming flicked his finger. A force flew out and pierced into Yen Song's dantian. It pierced through his dantian and crippled his cultivation. With his cultivation crippled, Yen Song could not fly. He fell to the ground heavily and screamed hysterically. You're the only one left. Lu Ming stepped toward Qing Fei and the State Preceptor. How dare you touch my beloved concubine? I will exterminate your 9 generations. The State Preceptor shouted and stood in front of Lu Ming. Lu Ming shook his head. The State Preceptor had completely lost his mind. It was useless to keep him alive. Chapter 1947. After killing the monarch, Lu Ming looked at Imperial concubine Qing. Imperial concubine Qing's eyes were filled with fear as she looked at Lu Ming. Suddenly, she smiled and said, "Young master, you have such a cultivation at such a young age. I'm really impressed." "Oh?" Lu Ming replied with a soft "oh." Yan Kuei and his son committed treason and killed the monarch. Fortunately, young master intervened and killed them to avenge the monarch. With young master's cultivation, you can lead the bright flame country. I'm willing to assist young master to ascend the throne and serve young master wholeheartedly. Imperial concubine Qing spoke with a pleasant voice. Her enchanting body twisted like a water snake and was about to pounce into Lu Ming's arms. At the same time, she looked into Lu Ming's eyes with a strange glint in her eyes. "Trying to seduce me? You're overestimating yourself," Lu Ming said plainly. When he said the last word, Lu Ming's eyes shone like stars. Imperial concubine Qing screamed as her body flew out and fell to the ground. She vomited blood and her face was pale with despair. Her cultivation had also been crippled. Lu Ming smiled faintly. This woman had tried to seduce him. She was overestimating herself. Lu Ming had only used a little power and she had already suffered a backlash and her cultivation was crippled. Lu Ming took a step forward and stood above the state preceptor. He looked down at the state preceptor and said calmly, "Your plan is not bad. It's a pity that you are too weak. What's the use of racking your brains? Heaven is not helping me." The Grand Tutor roared. His voice was hoarse and his eyes were filled with unwillingness and despair. He had tried his best to set up this trap. It was supposed to be flawless and Ruan Tianjiao had no chance to turn the tables. In the future, the bright flame country would definitely fall into his hands. He had never expected that Lu Ming would appear halfway and destroy all his plans with absolute power. In the face of absolute power, all plans were laughable. He finally understood why Lu Ming had been drinking calmly without saying a word when they were following the plan step by step. He was looking at them as if they were clowns. Lu Ming was letting them play. When they thought that the situation was settled, he would strike and easily destroyed all their plans, efforts, and plans. He could only blame heaven for not helping him. Why did someone like Lu Ming appear? Who are you? There's no one like you in the 9 nations? The Grand Tutor roared indignantly. You don't have the right to know who I am. Lu Ming spoke calmly. Afterward, Lu Ming looked at Ruan Tianjiao and said, "Tianjiao, how should we settle this?" At this moment, Ruan Tianjiao seemed to have just woken up from a dream. The shock that Lu Ming gave her was too strong. A great sage powerhouse was powerless in Lu Ming's hands. He could destroy them with a flip of his hand. She was shocked. Kill them all," said Ruan Tianjiao coldly. Since things had come to this point, there was no turning back. After making the decision, Ruan Tianjiao turned into an iron-blooded marshal and stepped forward. Sword light burst out and killed the Grand Tutor, Yan Song, concubine Qing, and some members of the royal family. Ruan Tianjiao transformed into a grim reaper and secretly killed his way into the depths of the palace, killing all the high-ranking members of the royal family. Since things had come to this point, Ruan Tianjiao knew that there was no turning back. Then, Ruan Tianjiao took the body of the unparalleled sword saint of Luoshui country and stood on the city tower of Desolation City. She announced to the world that the Grand Tutor had rebelled and colluded with the 4 marshals and concubine Qing to kill the king and the core members of the royal family in an attempt to usurp the throne. Later, Ruan Tianjiao arrived and killed the Grand Tutor and the rebels. Unfortunately, it was too late. The world was shocked when the news came out. A few days later, the Divine Wirm army reached the capital and took control of it. However, the other 4 marshals' armies also announced to the world that it was all Ruan Tianjiao's scheme. Ruan Tianjiao killed the Grand Tutor and the king in an attempt to usurp the throne. She led the army to attack the divine Wyrm army in the name of avenging the king. However, the four armies had lost experts like the marshals and their cohesion was greatly weakened. Moreover, the divine Wyrm army had cultivated the true dragon battle formation and was very powerful. They easily defeated the four armies and subdued them. At this point, the Bright Flame country was under Yuan Tianjiao's control. A few days later, the divine Wyrm army requested Yuan Tianjiao to ascend the throne on the grounds that the country could not be without a ruler. However, Yuan Tianjiao rejected them. A few days later, the generals tried again but were still rejected by Yuan Tianjiao. The third time, not only the generals but also countless commoners came to petition for Yuan Tianjiao to ascend the throne and take control of the Bright Flame country. In the past, the Bright Flame country's Grand Tutor was in power and was famous. Now that the Grand Tutor was killed, the commoners celebrated. As for Yuan Tianjiao, she had always been known as the goddess of war and was deeply loved by the commoners. Naturally, the commoners hoped that Yuan Tianjiao would take control of the Bright Flame country. Only then did Yuan Tianjiao agree to inherit the throne and become the empress. The Bright Flame country was bustling with activity as they prepared for the coronation ceremony. Lu Ming naturally would not interfere in these matters. To the Bright Flame country, he was just a passerby and would leave soon. Now, he only needed to wait for the Nine Nations Alliance before heading to the Time God Island to explore the sacred mountain of time. During this period of time, he quietly cultivated. However, not long after, a piece of news came. Luo Shui country had mobilized a large army and boarded a warship to attack the Bright Flame country. The entire Bright Flame country was shocked. Luo Shui country's national strength had always been above the Bright Flame country. They had always wanted to annex the Bright Flame country and the two countries had been at war for the past few years. Yuan Tianjiao immediately gave the order to mobilize a large army to attack Luo Shui country. Lu Ming also set off with the army. When they arrived at the northern part of the Bright Flame country, they saw a few huge warships flying towards them. In front of the warships, there was a large army riding on various types of strange beasts. The army looked powerful. Luo Shui country and the Bright Flame country have been on good terms for generations. However, such traitors have usurped the throne. Today, Luo Shui country is here to seek revenge from the Bright Flame country's ruler. A voice came from the army of Luo Shui country. How shameless! Yuan Tianjiao shook his head. Luo Shui country had been at war with the Bright Flame country for a long time. Luo Shui country had always been trying to invade the Bright Flame country. Now, in the mouth of Luo Shui country, it had become a good relationship between the two countries. If you want to find a reason to invade my country, you should find a better one. This reason is really laughable. Yuan Tianjiao's voice came out. Traitors, you still dare to be reasonable. Today is the day you die. Kill. Luo Shui country's commander gave the order. The army formed a battle formation and charged towards the Bright Flame country. Set up the formation and kill the enemy. Yuan Tianjiao gave the order. The divine Wyrm army set up a large formation. Suddenly, a true dragon appeared and roared towards the sky. Such a large formation, Luo Shui country's commander was shocked. Boom! The armies of the two countries collided fiercely. Chapter 1948. The army was defeated like a landslide. The army of Luo Shui country had only clashed with the divine Wyrm army a few times before they were torn apart. Their battle formation was also broken. Roar! The true dragon roared, and its huge dragon claw slammed down. A large number of soldiers were killed by the dragon claw, and blood filled the air. Run! The battle formation was broken, and it was even more impossible to defend against the divine Wyrm army. Soldiers were killed continuously, and the remaining soldiers were scared out of their wits and fled frantically. "Damn it, kill!" A loud roar came from Luo Shui country, and an armored general rushed out, releasing a shocking aura. This person was an eminent saint stage powerhouse. Luo Shui country was much stronger than Bright Flame country. They had many supreme saints, unlike Bright Flame country, which only had one imperial advisor. "Let me play with you." Lu Ming stepped out, and then waved his hand. A huge palm formed and pressed down on the other party. Ah, not good. The other party was scared out of his wits. He wanted to escape, but he was directly hit by the palm, and his body was torn into pieces. In the army, Ruan Tianjiao was secretly shocked. Lu Ming was simply unfathomable. He could kill a supreme saint expert with a raise of his hand. What kind of person was Lu Ming? Complete supreme saint? Or absolute saint? Ruan Tianjiao was curious, but then she shook her head. How could such a young absolute saint be possible? She estimated that Lu Ming's cultivation was at the peak of the supreme saint, or even at the complete supreme saint level. This was already very shocking. There was no suspense in this battle. Luo Shui country's army was defeated like a landslide, and almost all of them were wiped out. The remaining people either surrendered or fled. The few huge warships also belonged to Bright Flame country. When the news of the divine Wirm army defeating Luo Shui country spread, the whole country celebrated, and Ruan Tianjiao's reputation reached its peak. Taking this opportunity, Ruan Tianjiao ascended to the throne, becoming the only empress of Bright Flame country in so many years. In the following days, Lu Ming cultivated quietly. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. At this time, it was finally the day of the 9 countries alliance. Shanghai was the name of this sea region. In this sea region, there were a total of 9 countries, known as the 9 countries of Shanghai. Mingyan country and Luo Shui country were both part of the 9 countries of Shanghai. The purpose of this meeting was to select the candidates to go to the Divine Light Island. It was said that if one went to the Time Divine Island, there was a high chance that they would be accepted as a disciple by the Time Divine Island's experts. The Time God Island was the strongest power in the 10,000 Seas world. It was a holy land for cultivators. And this time, the location of the alliance meeting was in the capital of Blue Water Nation, one of the 9 nations. The Blue Water Nation was the strongest nation among the 9 nations and had always been the leader of the alliance of the 9 nations. Nguyen Tianjiao selected a group of experts and headed towards Changshui Nation with Lu Ming. 10 days later, they arrived at the capital of Blue Water Nation. A few days later, the 9-nation alliance officially started. In a square in front of the Blue Water Nation Imperial Palace, there were rows of tables and chairs. The monarchs of the 9 nations of the sea and some other experts were seated. The people of Blue Water Nation sat at the head of the table, representing their status as the leader of the alliance. Alright, this time's alliance meeting is the same as before. It is to select the candidates to go to the Time Divine Island. The 9 nations only have a total of 100 spots. A deep voice came from the side of Blue Water Nation. It was the monarch of Blue Water Nation. He looked to be in his 50s and was burly. His aura was deep and strong, and he was full of majesty. In my opinion, there should only be 8 nations this time. The Bright Flame Nation is not qualified to participate in this alliance meeting and is not qualified to go to the Time Divine Island. A cold voice sounded from the right side. The one who spoke was a thin middle-aged man. He was the monarch of Luo Shui Nation. Luo Shui Nation's meticulous plan of many years had been ruined. A few great saints had died consecutively, and their strength had weakened greatly. At this time, how could they not target the Bright Flame Nation? My Bright Flame Nation is not qualified to participate in the alliance meeting? Do you think you have the final say? Nguyen Tianjiao said coldly. That goes without saying. You, Nguyen Tianjiao, have the ambition of a wolf and rebelled. You killed the monarch of the Bright Flame Nation and replaced him. How can such a person be qualified to participate in the alliance meeting? The monarch of Luoshui Nation said coldly and continued to mock. The 9 nations of Blue Sea have a long history. Each nation's royal family has a noble bloodline. Who do you think you are? What qualifications do you have to rule the Bright Flame Nation? Your Luoshui Nation colluded with my Bright Flame Nation's imperial advisor to harm the previous monarch, causing the reputation of the Bright Flame Nation to be ruined. Later on, you wanted to harm me. How can I not resist? Nguyen Tianjiao sneered. A traitor is a traitor. No matter how much you say, you can't escape the fact that you are a traitor. The monarch of Luoshui Nation said coldly. He then looked at the monarch of Blue Water Nation and said, Brother Tsang, is Nguyen Tianjiao from the Bright Flame Nation qualified to participate in the alliance meeting? Is he qualified to go to the Time Divine Island? The monarch of Blue Water Nation said indifferently, the Time Divine Island is a sacred place. A traitor is indeed not qualified to go there. Everyone from the Bright Flame Nation, please return. The monarch of Blue Water Nation was obviously on the side of Luoshui Nation. This made Nguyen Tianjiao's face turn ugly. As for the people from the other nations, they looked on with gloating expressions. With the Bright Flame Nation leaving, they would have one less competitor. Naturally, they were happy to see that. What a joke. At this moment, Lu Ming smiled faintly. His disdainful voice spread across the entire place. Who do you think you are? When the monarchs are speaking, when is it your turn to interrupt? The monarch of Luoshui Nation glanced at Lu Ming and scolded. However, Lu Ming did not even bother to look at the monarch of Luoshui Nation and treated him like air. What's so funny? The monarch of Blue Water Nation looked at Lu Ming and asked coldly. Speaking of traitors, which of the founders of the 9 nations is not a traitor? If they are not traitors, how can there be the 9 nations today? Lu Ming said faintly. Tens of thousands of years ago, there were no 9 nations in the Blue Sea region. There was only one nation, the Blue Sea Nation. At that time, the Blue Sea Nation ruled the current territory of the 9 nations. Later, the ancestors of the 9 nations rebelled together and destroyed the Blue Sea Nation. It could be said that the ancestors of the 9 nations were all traitors. How dare you? Presumptuous, you are courting death. How dare you insult the ancestors, kill without mercy. The monarchs roared and their powerful auras shrouded Lu Ming. You are all traitors. What right do you have to speak about the Fire Nation? If the Bright Flame Nation is not qualified, then none of you are qualified. Lu Ming was still calm and his voice was full of contempt. You are courting death. On the side of Blue Water Nation, an old man flew out. He did not hide his cold murderous intent. A terrifying sword light bloomed from his hand and charged towards Lu Ming. This person had the cultivation of the perfect bright saint realm. Get lost! Lu Ming shouted. The old man's sword light collapsed and his body shook violently. He flew back at a faster speed than when he came and vomited blood. The monarchs of the various nations and other experts all narrowed their eyes and showed a trace of seriousness. Chapter 1949. Especially the king of Luoshui country, he was even more shocked. Could it be that the deaths of several people from Luoshui country were caused by this person? For a moment, many experts seemed to have forgotten to speak. Lu Ming stood up and looked around. His eyes were as bright as the stars. He said, I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Make a blood oath. From today onwards, the leader of the 9 countries of Sea Realm will be Ming Yen country and Yuan Tianjiao will be the leader. The quota for the Time Island will be decided by Ming Yen country. After the incident with the Grand Master, Lu Ming understood that there was no need to listen to these people's nonsense. It was purely a waste of time to talk nonsense with them. It was better to use force to intimidate them. Huh! When Lu Ming's voice fell, the people from the other 8 countries were stunned. They looked at Lu Ming in a daze as if they were looking at a fool. If this wasn't a fool, then what was? He directly asked them to make a blood oath to elect Ming Yen country as the leader and let Ming Yen country arrange the quota for the Divine Light Island. This was simply ridiculous. It was the biggest joke in the world. Did Lu Ming think that he was invincible just because he could injure a great sage with a shout? It was simply ridiculous. Especially the people from Tsangshui country, their faces were particularly gloomy. The leader of the 9 countries had always been Tsangshui country. What was Ming Yen country trying to do? They wanted to usurp the position of the leader of the 9 countries? They were courting death. In my opinion, this kid is completely crazy. He is spouting nonsense here. Ming Yen country is hopeless. Why don't we just send an expert to destroy Ming Yen country and support another person to rule Ming Yen country? The king of Luoshui country said coldly. So much nonsense. In that case, I announce that Luoshui country is out. They are not qualified to participate in the 9 countries alliance and are not qualified to set foot on the Time Island. Get lost. Lu Ming glanced at Luoshui country and said coldly. Once again, everyone looked at Lu Ming as if they were looking at a fool. Especially the people from Luoshui country. You don't want to leave? If you don't want to leave, then get rid of them. Lu Ming said coldly. As his voice fell, he stepped in the direction of Luoshui country. Arrogant, kill him. The king of Luoshui country coldly shouted. Immediately, a few experts charged out from behind him. 2 great sage small mastery and 3 bright sage great perfection. These were the only top experts left in Luoshui country. The 5 great experts joined forces, and their aura was astonishing. They wanted to kill Lu Ming in one fell swoop. That kid is dead for sure. Some of the monarchs had a cold smile on their faces, but in the next moment, the cold smile on their faces disappeared and was replaced by astonishment, extreme astonishment. Lu Ming punched out, causing the void to tremble violently. The air was compressed together and then exploded, forming a terrifying fist force. The power of the fist crushed through, and the 5 cultivators from Luoshui country exploded into pieces. Not even their bones remained. Hiss hiss hiss, gasps could be heard one after another. Everyone's expression stiffened. No! After a long while, King Luoshui let out a miserable scream. These 5 people were the 5 strongest people in Luoshui country. With the death of these 5 people, Luoshui country's strength would rapidly decrease, becoming the weakest country among the 9 countries. Sooner or later, it would be annexed by other countries. His heart ached so much that it was bleeding. But when he saw Lu Ming continue to step toward him, he was terrified and shouted, "Brother Tsang, help! This person is lawless. You must get rid of him. Stop!" King Tsangshui roared. But Lu Ming didn't seem to hear him. He took a step forward and appeared beside King Luoshui country. The king of Luoshui wanted to escape, but Lu Ming took a step forward. The king of Luoshui screamed miserably as Lu Ming stomped on his face. He spat out mouthfuls of blood and convulsed continuously. How dare you? Kill him! King Tsangshui country was furious. He had already asked Lu Ming to stop, but Lu Ming ignored him. Kill! Kill! 2 loud shouts came from Tsangshui country. 2 figures stepped out, and a terrifying aura bloomed in the void. Peak Great Sage and Perfected Great Sage. Someone exclaimed and was shocked. The people from other countries were trembling in their hearts. Tsangshui country was worthy of being the leader of the 9 countries. For tens of thousands of years, it had been firmly sitting on the throne of the 9 countries. Its strength was amazing. The moment it attacked, it was a peak great sage. Such an expert was enough to destroy a small country. Ruan Tianjiao and the others from Bright Flame Country couldn't help but feel nervous. Although Lu Ming was powerful, was he a match for a peak great sage expert? But in the face of such an expert, they were powerless and could only watch helplessly. The 2 experts from Xiangshui Country approached Lu Ming at an extremely fast speed. Let go of King Luoshui. The great sage peak powerhouse bellowed and pointed his finger in the air. A terrifying finger force pierced toward Lu Ming's glabella. You're courting death. Lu Ming said coldly and then threw out another punch. This punch was more terrifying than the previous one. The void trembled as the pressure crushed down. The peak great sage expert's body exploded, along with the other great sage expert behind him, who was in the great mastery of the great sage realm. Both of them were killed instantly. At this moment, the hearts and bodies of everyone present were trembling uncontrollably. Everyone's gaze was fixed on Lu Ming and they could not shift their gaze away. One punch, another punch. The great sage peak powerhouse was smashed into pieces, just like the great sage initial mastery powerhouse previously. It was as if there was no difference in the cultivation level of those people in Lu Ming's hands. Strong, too strong. Lu Ming is too strong. Beside Ruan Tianjiao, several of his subordinates were trembling. It was unknown whether they were excited or agitated. Lu Ming, where is your limit? Ruan Tianjiao's voice was also trembling. The more time she spent with Lu Ming, the more she realized that Lu Ming was unfathomable. It was as if Lu Ming's combat strength was limitless. Ever since she met Lu Ming, no matter what kind of opponent he faced, Lu Ming was always calm and collected. He did not even need to use a second move to kill his opponent. The king of Luoshui Country trembled under Lu Ming's feet and broke out in cold sweat. At this moment, he was almost scared to death. What kind of terrifying monster was this? There was no way he could resist. I surrender. I swear to follow the Bright Flame Country for the rest of my life and serve them as the leader. The king of Luoshui Country shouted, afraid that Lu Ming would trample him to death. Lu Ming did not even look at him. He looked at Xiangshui Country and said, it seems that Xiangshui Country also wants to be eliminated. I'll fulfill your wish. After saying that, he stepped out and headed toward Xiangshui Country. The king of Xiangshui Country turned pale. A peak great sage expert was the strongest expert in Xiangshui Country, but in front of Lu Ming, he could not withstand a single blow and was instantly killed. Lu Ming, you'd better quit while you're ahead. Otherwise, it won't be good for either of us. The king of Xiangshui Country said. Is that so? I'm a little curious. Why won't you let me benefit? Lu Ming continued to step forward with a faint smile on his face. Chapter 1950. The ruler of Xiangshui nation bowed to the 2 old men sitting behind him. His respectful attitude stunned everyone. Xiangshui Country was ranked first among the 9 nations of Xi. He was also the most powerful person in the 9 nations of Xi. Who could make him bow so low? The crowd's gazes all landed on the 2 old men. However, the expressions of the 2 old men were extremely ugly. Lu Ming smiled faintly. He looked at the 2 elders and said, "Are you sure you want to fight?" The 2 elders forced a smile and stood up to cup their fists at Lu Ming. One of them said, "Young Master Lu, you must be joking. How would we dare to fight with you?" That's right. The 2 elders were outsiders. When they first arrived, they appeared on the same island as Lu Ming. They had seen Lu Ming kill the emperor-to-be of the Golden Crow clan with their own eyes. They were only in the complete absolute saint realm. How would they dare to fight with Lu Ming? Wouldn't that be courting death? The attitude of the two elders made the lord of Tsangshui country stiffen. He looked at the two elders in disbelief. The two elders had appeared in Tsangshui country some time ago. The strength they displayed was earth-shattering and unfathomable. The lord of Tsangshui country was shocked and regarded as an almighty. However, such people were trembling in fear in front of Lu Ming. How could this be? Who was that young man? The lord of Tsangshui country's heart sank. You want to go to the sacred mountain of time as well, right? Lu Ming asked. The two elders nodded. Very well. Now, kill them and I'll give you 2 places. Lu Ming said coldly, pointing at the lord of Tsangshui country and the experts. The lord of Tsangshui country's expression changed drastically. He shouted, Senior, no. Kill. Kill. The two elders looked at each other and then attacked the lord of Tsangshui country and the others. The lord of Tsangshui country and the experts were unable to resist the attacks of the complete absolute saint realm experts. They were killed immediately. Even the supreme saints were unable to resist. In the blink of an eye, the lord of Blueswater Nation and the experts of Blueswater Nation were all killed. Only a few of the weaker ones were left, trembling with pale faces. So powerful. The people from the other countries were shocked when they saw the two elders. They were too powerful. The cultivation of the two elders was unfathomable. Tsangshui country had many supreme saints, but they were unable to fight back against the two elders. Lord! Many people's hearts trembled, and they began to sweat or. Ruan Tianjiao and the people from Bright Flame country were also shocked. What is Lu Ming's identity? Even the two elders were so respectful to Lu Ming. Lu Ming was becoming more and more mysterious in their eyes. I said that Bright Flame country will be the alliance leader of the 9 countries. The quota for the Time God Island will be decided by Bright Flame country. Do you have any objections? Lu Ming said faintly as he glanced at the crowd. No objections. None at all. Young Master Lu is unparalleled in the world. No one has ever been able to surpass him. I will be the first to punish anyone who dares to object. The lord of Luoshui country finally seized the opportunity and was the first to shout, flattering Lu Ming. Many people cursed the lord of Luoshui country for being shameless. He had mocked Lu Ming and said that he was a fool. Now, he was praising Lu Ming. No objections. Bright Flame country thinks that they have some strength and are overbearing. They should have given up the alliance leader position long ago. That's right. The Bright Flame country is suitable for the alliance leader position. The quota for the Time God Island will also be decided by Bright Flame country. The other monarchs of the 7 countries spoke one after another, flattering Lu Ming. What a joke. With Lu Ming's strength, how would they dare to disagree? In the martial arts world, no matter where it was, there was only one rule. The weak were prey to the strong. Only strength was the truth. Make a blood oath. Otherwise, when I leave, who knows if you will attack Bright Flame country? Lu Ming said faintly. We dare not, we dare not. Whoever dares to attack Bright Flame country, I will fight him to the death. The monarchs expressed their stance and made a blood oath to wholeheartedly support Bright Flame country as the alliance leader. At this moment, their lives were more important and they did not dare to have any objections. Ruan Tianjiao sat on the throne of the alliance leader of the 9 countries in a daze. During this period, she felt like she was in a dream. First, he sat on the throne of Bright Flame country. Then, he sat on the throne of the alliance leader of the 9 countries. If she did not experience it herself, she would not have believed it. Lu Ming, who are you? Ruan Tianjiao whispered. She felt emotional. That day, she had relied on her intuition to keep Lu Ming by her side. It was the best decision she had made in her life. It was also the most important decision. Otherwise, she would have been framed and killed by the Grand Master. What happened next was simple. Ruan Tianjiao sat on the throne of the alliance leader. She chose a prince with a weaker cultivation in Sangshui country and supported him to sit on the throne. This person naturally listened to Ruan Tianjiao's orders. Then, she began to choose the candidates to go to the Time God Island. After everything was done, they stayed in Sangshui country and waited for the arrival of the messenger of the Time God Island. In a huge courtyard, Lu Ming and Ruan Tianjiao were drinking. Tianjiao, your spiritual body should be an inferior heaven spiritual body. Lu Ming said. Yes. Ruan Tianjiao nodded. Ruan Tianjiao's spiritual body was extremely rare in the 9 countries of the sea. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to cultivate to the great sage realm at such a young age and be known as the goddess of war of the country of brightness. I have a treasure that can help your spiritual body evolve, but how much you can gain depends on you. Lu Ming said. He planned to use the Great Pill Furnace to help Ruan Tianjiao refine her spiritual body. It was fate that brought them together. He wanted to help Ruan Tianjiao improve her strength as much as possible. Otherwise, when he left, Ruan Tianjiao's strength wouldn't be enough to deter the experts of other countries. It can help my spiritual body evolve? Ruan Tianjiao was shocked. There was actually such a treasure in this world. Lu Ming smiled and waved his hand. The Great Pill Furnace appeared and landed on the ground. The process of refining with alchemy fire will be very painful. If you can't bear it, tell me. Lu Ming said. What's the point of pain? Ruan Tianjiao smiled and entered the Great Pill Furnace. Lu Ming waved his hand and threw in a large number of sacred herbs to help Ruan Tianjiao refine her spiritual body. Ruan Tianjiao's willpower was very strong. She persevered until the end every time. Chapter 1951. After Ruan Tianjiao broke through, Lu Ming gave her 2 absolute sacred weapons. Only then did Lu Ming feel at ease. With Ruan Tianjiao's current cultivation of the Great Sage Small Mastery, coupled with the mid-level heavenly spiritual body and the ultimate holy weapon, he was able to contend with a Great Sage Pinnacle elite. In the 9 nations of the sea, there was no one who could match him. It was enough to intimidate other nations and secure the throne of the Alliance Master. Half a month later, a warship broke through the sky and stopped above the capital of Sangshui Nation. The emissary of the Time God Island had arrived. The 100 people who were going to the Time God Island were ready. Most of them were young people. It was said that those who went to the Time God Island could receive guidance from the powerful existences there. If they were lucky, they could even be taken in as a disciple and stay there to cultivate. Ruan Tianjiao was also one of the candidates. She was a rare genius and naturally did not want to miss the opportunity to go to the Time God Island. Everyone boarded the warship. Then, the warship broke through the sky and disappeared into the sea of the 9 nations of the sea. The warship was astonishingly fast. It was like a ray of light that cut through the void. Standing on the warship, looking at the boundless sea below, it disappeared into the distance in an instant. This time, after flying for more than 10 days, the speed of the warship suddenly slowed down. We're about to reach the Time God Island. The emissary of the Time God Island said. We're about to reach? Everyone was stunned because when they looked around, there was no sign of the island. At a glance, there was only the boundless sea. There was no island at all. Buzz! At that moment, the warship vibrated slightly as if it had passed through some kind of barrier. In the next moment, everyone widened their eyes in surprise. This was because a huge island had appeared in the sky ahead of them. This island was actually floating in the air. A floating island. So there's a formation here. Lu Ming smiled slightly. This sea region was set up with a powerful formation. Without special means, one could not enter or see the Time God Island. No wonder there was a rumor that without the emissary of the Time God Island, no one could find the Time God Island. The warship flew into the Time God Island and stopped in an open space. Everyone got off the warship. Come with me. I'll bring you to your residence. In a few days, there will be experts from the Time God Island who will test you. After saying this, the emissary flew forward. Everyone followed him, and before long, they arrived at a place filled with palaces. At a glance, there were many huge palaces. Each palace was separated by a certain distance, and it was quite luxurious. Every palace here is marked with a name. You 9 nations of the sea live in a palace. Go and find it yourselves. The emissary left behind these words, and then rose into the air, leaving this place. Everyone descended and began to search the numerous palaces. K9 See 6 nations. The 3 kingdoms of Ming Sea. Xianling Kingdom. They saw that there were different signs outside the different halls. Not long after, they arrived at a palace. Written on the door of the palace were the words, 9 kingdoms in the sea. They had arrived at their palace. However, the entrance to the palace was open. This caused them to be slightly stunned. Logically speaking, since they hadn't moved in yet, the door should be closed. Everyone's curiosity was piqued as they walked in. As soon as they walked in, they saw a few figures sitting in the courtyard, drinking tea. When they saw Lu Ming and the others enter, they looked at them with sharp gazes. This is where we live. Get out of here. A tall young man waved his hand casually as if he was shooing a group of country bumpkins away. His tone made the faces of the people from the 9 nations of the sea turn ugly. Everyone, it clearly says that this is the palace of the 9 nations of the sea. Did you come to the wrong place? Ruan Tianjiao cupped his fists and said. Do you think I'm blind? Of course, I know that this is the palace of the 9 nations of the sea. But now, it belongs to Xianling Kingdom. There are too many of us, and the original palace can't accommodate all of us. As for you, you can find a place to stay in the wilderness. The tall young man said casually. The faces of Ruan Tianjiao and the others turned ugly. However, at the same time, they were also shocked. Xianling High Nation. Those that could be called a high nation were all extremely powerful nations that ruled over a vast territory. Even if the 9 nations of the sea were to join forces, they would still be a far cry from them. Everyone, this is the palace that the Time God Island assigned to the 9 nations of the sea. It's not good for you to occupy it like this. If we report this to the Time God Island, even Xianling Kingdom will have a hard time explaining themselves. Ruan Tianjiao said with a sullen face. Are you threatening me? The tall young man's eyes flashed sharply as he stared at Ruan Tianjiao. I wouldn't dare. Ruan Tianjiao said. If you don't dare, then get lost. The tall young man scolded. Then we can only look for the emissary of the Time God Island. Ruan Tianjiao said coldly and turned to leave. How dare you? The tall young man shouted and suddenly stood up. A powerful aura spread out as he scolded, You're really shameless. How dare you threaten me in the 9 nations of the sea, a trashy sea region. With every sentence, the tall young man took a step forward. His aura grew stronger and stronger, and many people from the 9 nations of the sea turned ugly. The Great Saint Realm. The tall young man looked so young, but he had already reached the Great Saint Realm. It was really shocking. No wonder he was from Xianling Kingdom. The tall young man's eyes were indifferent. He glanced at Ruan Tianjiao and said, Woman, you look good. I'll give you a chance. Kneel down and admit your mistake. Then, serve me for a few days, and I'll let this matter go. Damn it. Some of the young men from Bright Flame Country were furious. It was the other party who had occupied their residence. Ruan Tianjiao had only said that he wanted to look for the emissary of the Time God Temple, but the other party was so aggressive. He wanted Ruan Tianjiao to kneel down and admit her mistake, and even wanted her to serve him for a few days. What did they do wrong? It was the other party's fault. What did you say? You're courting death. The tall young man looked at the young man from Bright Flame Country with a sharp gaze. He then took a step forward and pounced on the young man from Bright Flame Country at lightning speed. A terrifying saber light slashed at the young man. It was a killing move. If it hit, the young man would die without a doubt. The tall young man was too overbearing. He wanted to kill just because of a disagreement. At that moment, Ruan Tianjiao moved. The sword light in his hand bloomed and slashed at the tall young man's saber light. Clang! The saber and sword collided. The tall young man's body shook and he took a few steps back. Ruan Tianjiao had blocked the attack. How dare you fight back? I'll kill you first. The tall young man shouted coldly. A shocking attack burst out and charged at Ruan Tianjiao. In an instant, he slashed out hundreds of times. Layers of saber light enveloped Ruan Tianjiao. However, Ruan Tianjiao was calm. A dragon's roar came from his body. He slashed out with his sword and a sword light turned into a huge dragon shadow. Chapter 1952. In just one move, the tall youth was at a disadvantage and spat out a mouthful of blood. The tall youth's cultivation was the same as Ruan Tianjiao's. He was also a great sage minor perfection. However, the tall youth's spiritual body was only an inferior heaven spiritual body while Ruan Tianjiao's current spiritual body was an intermediate heaven spiritual body. Naturally, he was no match for him. You're courting death. The tall youth roared, his eyes filled with murderous intent. An ant from the 9 nations in the sea had injured him. It was unforgivable. Previously, he was still high and mighty, looking down on the people of the 9 nations in the sea. But now, he was injured by Ruan Tianjiao. If he had been defeated by someone of the older generation, it would still be acceptable. However, Ruan Tianjiao appeared to be even younger than him. This made him feel as if he had lost all face. Kill! All of you must die today. The tall youth roared and charged at Ruan Tianjiao again. But after a few moves, he was defeated by Ruan Tianjiao. How dare you injure the genius of the Xianling exalted nation? You deserve to die. On the other side, the few people who were with the tall youth stood up with cold faces. Whoosh! Whoosh! Figures kept rushing out of the palace. Among them, there were a few old men with violent and powerful auras. I told you to get lost. You're courting death. One of the elders stepped toward Ruan Tianjiao with a cold face. His terrifying aura forced Ruan Tianjiao to retreat. An absolute saint. Ruan Tianjiao's voice interrupted. The other people of the 9 nations in the sea were also shocked. The strength of the Xianling exalted nation was too strong. Even an absolute saint had come. Let me do it. Lu Ming said. He took a step forward and appeared in front of Ruan Tianjiao, blocking his aura. At this moment, Lu Ming was speechless. Why was it that no matter where he went, he would always run into such arrogant idiots? In fact, there were many such people in this world. With some power and status, they would look down on those of lower status and feel superior in front of those of lower status. But once they met someone of higher status, they would immediately put on a humble front. There were too many such people. Looking at Lu Ming's back, Ruan Tianjiao suddenly calmed down. I'll give you one last chance. Get lost. Lu Ming said calmly. Little bastard, are you crazy? Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. There was a cold glint in the eyes of the holy elder as he struck his palm toward Lu Ming. As the palm struck down, the space howled madly. The people from the Xianling Hai nation smiled proudly. With this attack, Lu Ming would definitely die. They could almost see the scene of Lu Ming being killed. But in the next moment, their smiles froze. Lu Ming stretched out a hand and grabbed the old man's hand. The old man's hand stopped in the air. The old man's expression changed. He became a little frightened because no matter how much saint power he unleashed, Lu Ming's palm did not move at all. How was this possible? He was a paragon saint, a high and mighty paragon saint. How old was Lu Ming? How could he have such strength? I gave you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. How sad. Lu Ming said coldly. He unleashed his saint power and flung the old man out. The old man's body was flung out and landed heavily on the ground. The earth rumbled and the floor cracked. The old man's body was embedded in a huge pit, twitching non-stop. Everyone's expression froze. Even though the people from the 9 nations of the sea knew that Lu Ming's strength was unfathomable, they were still shocked to witness a legendary absolute sage being smashed to the ground by Lu Ming so easily. The scene was too shocking. The tall young man from the Xianling Hai nation was pale and trembling. He could not believe that there was such an expert in the 9 nations of the sea who could defeat a paragon saint in one move. Bam! Lu Ming stepped forward and stomped on the old man's body. The terrifying power shattered the old man's saint heart. With his saint heart shattered, his cultivation was destroyed. The holy elder let out a cry of despair. You're courting death. Another old man from the Xianling Hai nation shouted. His voice spread far and wide. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the next moment, there were sounds of people flying through the air and arriving. These were the powerful figures of Xianling Heavenly Nation. Previously, they had stayed in their own palaces and did not stay here. At this moment, all of them had rushed over. After learning that Lu Ming had crippled an absolute saint, they were shocked and exuded a cold murderous intent. How dare you offend the Xianling Hai nation? Kill him! An old woman with white hair shouted. Her killing intent was as sharp as a knife. The Xianling Hai nation was one of the most powerful nations in the Infinite Seas realm. They were one of the few great nations. Apart from the Time Island, they could dominate the Infinite Seas realm. But now, a mere 9 nations of the sea dared to destroy someone from the Xianling Hai nation. They were courting death. In an instant, at least 10 Sage Realm powerhouses released their auras. The terrifying pressure pressed toward Lu Ming. The 2 old men from the 9 nations of the sea shook their heads speechlessly. They knew Lu Ming's strength. How dare the Xianling Hai nation treat Lu Ming with such an attitude? They were courting death. They could already see the miserable state of the Xianling Hai nation. Kill! The white-haired old woman took the lead and launched a terrifying attack at Lu Ming. At the same time, the other paragon saints attacked as well. More than 10 attacks flew toward Lu Ming. They wanted to crush Lu Ming with one attack. You asked for it. Lu Ming said indifferently. Then, he punched out. The space shook and formed a terrifying force that destroyed all the attacks of the paragon saints. How is this possible? All the experts of the Xianling Hai nation were shocked. He destroyed more than 10 paragon saints' attacks with one attack. What kind of strength was this? Oh no! They were shocked. They had a bad feeling. Some of them even retreated, but it was too late. Boom! Boom! Lu Ming waved his fists continuously. Streams of fist force rushed out, crushing those people with irresistible force. Bang! 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 The paragon saints didn't even have time to scream before they were blown into the air. Not even ashes were left. In an instant, only the white-haired old woman remained out of the dozen or so absolute saints. At this moment, the old woman was terrified. She ran away frantically. "Stop!" At this moment, a loud shout came from afar. It was filled with anger. But Lu Ming didn't seem to hear it. He punched out again. The old woman exploded. Her body and soul were destroyed. The surroundings fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at Lu Ming in shock. More than 10 paragon saints were killed in an instant. This was too terrifying. "Lu Ming, where is your limit?" Ruan Tianjiao seemed to be numb. He only smiled bitterly and was curious. "How dare you?" Chapter 1953. More than 10 figures appeared and they were led by a young man in a golden robe. "Big brother." The tall young man from Xianling High Country was overjoyed when he saw the young man. His big brother had finally arrived. His big brother had come to Time Spiritual Island 6 years ago and had been accepted as a disciple by one of the sacred emperors of Time Spiritual Island. He had a high status in Time Spiritual Island. He was relieved that his big brother had arrived. Not good. Ruan Tianjiao's face changed drastically when he saw the young man. "Lu Ming. He is wearing a golden robe and there is a picture of the River of Time on his sleeves. That is the symbol of a core disciple of Time Spiritual Island." Ruan Tianjiao quickly sent a message to Lu Ming. A core disciple of Time Spiritual Island was the highest-ranking disciple in Time Spiritual Island. There were only a few core disciples in Time Spiritual Island and they had a high status. The young man was obviously from Xianling High Country. This was troublesome. Xian Chuan was the young man's name. Xian Chuan was furious and he was filled with killing intent. He had come out of seclusion today and wanted to see the people from Xianling High Country. His younger brother had come as well. However, he had not expected to see Lu Ming killing the experts from Xianling High Country. More than 10 absolute saints. Even Xianling High Country could not afford to lose them. That was more than half of the experts in Xianling High Country. "Brat, I'll make sure you die a horrible death. And all of you from the 9 nations of the sea will die." Xian Chuan stared coldly at Lu Ming. He wanted to cut Lu Ming into pieces. "You people from Xianling High Country occupied our palace. You people from Xianling High Country attacked us first. How can we not fight back?" Ruan Tianjiao shouted. "Shut up." Xian Chuan shouted and his eyes turned cold. "So what? Even if we occupied your palace and wanted to kill you first, so what? You should not have fought back. If you fought back, you would have died." Xian Chuan was overbearing. He did not care about the cause and process. He only cared about the result. If the experts from Xianling High Country were killed, Lu Ming and the others would die. "Big brother, you must avenge the elders." The tall young man shouted. "Don't worry." Xian Chuan said coldly, "The 9 nations of the sea are lawless. They openly killed the experts of other nations on the Spacetime Island. All of them deserve the death penalty. Kill them all." "Yes." A few people walked out from behind Xian Chuan. A terrifying aura was released. These people were all at the peak of the Absolute Saint realm. These people were all experts from the Time God Island. Their expressions were cold and they didn't care about who was right and who was wrong. If Xian Chuan said to kill, they would kill. Xian Chuan's position in the Time Divine Island was extraordinary. He was loved by many saint emperors. His words were the law and the truth. The faces of the 9 nations of the sea, including Nguyen Tianjiao, turned sour. The Time God Island wasn't like the other countries. They were the strongest group in the Milky Way world. They had many saint emperors. If they offended the Time God Island, the 9 countries of Shanghai would be eliminated. Lu Ming also frowned slightly. He was not afraid of himself, but he was worried that he would implicate the 9 nations of the sea. Kneel down and accept your punishment. A peak absolute saint said coldly. He slapped down and a huge palm was formed, pressing down on Lu Ming. Lu Ming punched out and destroyed the huge palm. Xian Chuan's eyes narrowed. Lu Ming's combat power was very strong. He could even block a perfected absolute saint. Is he also from the outer world? Xian Chuan's heart jumped. With his status, he naturally knew many things that others didn't. During this period of time, many experts had suddenly appeared in the 10,000 Seas world. Each and every one of them had a profound cultivation base and powerful battle prowess. Many of them weren't any weaker than the Time Divine Emperor. He had heard from some elders that these people might have come from the outer world. At first, he was extremely shocked. If Lu Ming was also from the outer world, things would be difficult. Xian Chuan frowned. The people of the Xianling kingdom can't die in vain. Xian Chuan clenched his fists tightly. So what if he was from the outer world? The Time Divine Island would not be afraid. Let's attack together. With a wave of his hand, a few perfected absolute saint cultivators charged toward Lu Ming again. All of them used their killing moves. You're the ones who want to die. Lu Ming said coldly. He had already backed down and didn't fight back. However, they were obviously pushing their luck. He knew that backing down was useless against such people. He had to use force to make them fear him. Bang! Lu Ming stepped forward and rushed up. He punched out and a phantom of the suppressing hell steel appeared, pressing down on a peak absolute saint. The expert's attack instantly collapsed under the phantom of the suppressing hell steel. As the phantom of the suppressing hell steel pressed down, the expert screamed and his body was torn apart. Then, Lu Ming punched out again and killed another peak absolute saint. How is this possible? Xian Chuan shouted. Lu Ming's battle strength was too terrifying. He could even kill a peak absolute saint. The tall young man and the others from the Xianling kingdom all paled. In their eyes, Lu Ming was a god of death. Release the signal. Release the signal. Gather all the experts on the Time Divine Island. Xian Chuan shouted as he retreated. Kill. Lu Ming stepped into the air and charged towards Xian Chuan. Since he had attacked, he would kill them all. Lu Ming, it's you. Kill. At this moment, a roar sounded. Then, a terrifying sword light slashed from afar. It was so terrifying that it seemed like it was going to split the Time Divine Island in half. Lu Ming's eyes narrowed. An absolute saint battle sword appeared in his hand and he slashed out. Boom! Intense explosions and boundless sword chi spread out in all directions. Whoosh! In the distance, there was a flash of light and a middle-aged man appeared in the air. Spots of light lit up on his body and hundreds of saint weapons floated around him. At the same time, a river of laws surrounded him. The Wan clan. Lu Ming squinted his eyes. It seemed like many experts who had entered the 10,000 Seas realm had come to the Time Divine Island like him. They were obviously here to explore the Time Divine Mountain. The River of Laws. That's the Sacred Emperor. Oh my God, the Sacred Emperor has appeared. Could it be the Sacred Emperor of the Time Divine Island? Exclamations sounded. In the 10,000 Seas realm, the Boundary Emperor was known as the Sacred Emperor. They were the strongest experts in the 10,000 Seas realm. Because there was no martial emperor in the 10,000 Seas realm, the Immortal realm was only a legend. Yuan Tianjiao and the others were also shocked. Now that the Sacred Emperor had appeared, would Lu Ming be able to defeat him? Roar! At this moment, a shocking roar sounded. In the distance, a giant wolf that was as big as a mountain stepped through the air. This giant wolf was also surrounded by the river of laws. Whoosh! Chapter 1954. The quasi-emperors of the Heavenly Wolf Pagoda and the Purple Extreme Sect are all here. Lu Ming muttered with narrowed eyes. The three quasi-emperors stood in three different directions, surrounding Lu Ming in the middle. The many people of the 10,000 Seas realm's small nations in the surroundings were shocked. Three holy emperors appeared. Furthermore, based on the situation, they all showed hostility to Lu Ming. These holy emperors do not look like they are from the Time Divine Island. That's right. I have never heard of a huge wolf becoming a holy emperor in the Time Divine Island. Many people discussed in whispers. The people of the 9 nations of the 10,000 Seas paled. So many holy emperors wanted to deal with Lu Ming. As for Xian Chuan, he rejoiced. He roared, "Quickly send the signal and gather the Deity Island's experts." Whoosh! An expert beside Xian Chuan waved his hand, and a beam of light soared into the sky, forming a long river of time. Everyone on the Time Divine Island could see it. Xian Chuan's words caused the hearts of the crowd to tremble violently once again. Based on Xian Chuan's words, these holy emperors were not from the Time Divine Island. However, aside from the Time Divine Island, no other faction in the 10,000 Seas realm had holy emperors. Furthermore, 3 of them appeared at once. G.A.A.O. Just at this moment, a few sharp cries rang out. A huge 3-legged golden crow appeared in the sky. Aside from that, there was also a huge silver-white wolf. All of them were quasi-emperors. Many experts from the various factions entered the Lotus Flower world. Naturally, there were more than 1 or 2 quasi-emperors. That is a 3-legged golden crow. The legendary holy beast, the 3-legged golden crow. Someone exclaimed. In the 10,000 Seas realm, the 3-legged golden crow was a legendary holy beast that had never appeared before. Today, one actually appeared. So, this is Lu Ming? A cold voice came from a gust of wind. Lu Ming, you have been hiding for so long. Today, you will die. Hand over the Heavenly Emperor's sword. Another voice came from the other side. The Han clan's people. Lu Ming muttered, revealing intense murderous intent in his eyes. It seemed that almost all of his enemies had arrived today. At the same time, whether it was the people from the 9 nations of the sea, the Xianling Heavenly Nation, or the other nations, they were all stunned. 9 Saint Emperors. A total of 9 Saint Emperors surrounded Lu Ming. They were all hostile towards Lu Ming. Lu Ming. There was deep worry in Ruan Tianjiao's eyes. At that moment, several figures flew out from the Time Spiritual Island, each of them emitting powerful auras. The experts from the Time God Island had arrived. Xian Chuan, what happened? An elder asked. He looked at the quasi-emperor of the Golden Crow tribe and the others with a solemn expression. It's that brat. He killed the people of our Time Divine Island. How lawless. Xian Chuan pointed at Lu Ming, talking coldly. How dare you kill the people of the Time Island? How dare you? The old man coldly shouted. Together with the other 2 powerhouses, they stepped towards Lu Ming. Around their bodies, the same river of laws appeared. Saint Emperors, more Saint Emperors. A total of 12 Saint Emperors surrounded Lu Ming. This brat actually has so many enemies. He is dead meat. Xian Chuan laughed in his heart. As for the people from the smaller nations, they were all confused. Everything that had happened today was beyond their imagination. Aside from the Time Divine Island, where did so many Saint Emperors come from? Lu Ming, hand over the Heavenly Emperor's sword. The Saint Emperor of the Han clan shouted coldly. If you want it, come and get it yourself. Lu Ming said coldly. The saint force in his body circulated crazily, pushing his strength to the maximum. It seemed like he had to fight today. Young Master Xinghe once said that he would kill you personally. Today, I will be the one to kill you. The Quasi-Emperor of the Han clan said coldly. He was the first to attack. A pale white sword radiance bloomed and slashed towards Lu Ming. Hundreds of acupuncture points on Lu Ming's body lit up. Hundreds of saint weapons flew out and the aura of the weapons soared to the sky. Whoosh! With a thought from Lu Ming, a supreme saint battle sword flew towards the sword light of the Quasi-Emperor of the Han clan. Dang! The battle sword vibrated and was knocked back. However, it managed to block the other party's sword. Lu Ming is cunning and treacherous. There is no need to talk about rules with him. Let's attack together. The Quasi-Emperor of the Wan clan shouted and attacked as well. The aura of the boundless saint weapons gathered and sent out a vast sword light towards Lu Ming's throat. This was a rare opportunity in the world of the lotus flower. They could use this opportunity to kill Lu Ming. If they left the world of the lotus flower, it would be difficult to kill Lu Ming. Furthermore, if they sent out an expert, the Great Pill Development Palace's Uncle Kong would probably make a move. Uncle Kong would not be able to say anything if Xiao Chen was killed while searching for treasures in the world of the lotus flower. If you want to work together, just say it. Why do you need to make it sound so dignified? Lu Ming smiled coldly and punched. The image of the hell-suppressing steel appeared and flew towards the Quasi-Emperor of the Wan clan. Dong! The hell-suppressing steel image trembled with the might of suppressing the heavens. It struck the Quasi-Emperor of the Wan clan saint weapons, causing the Quasi-Emperor's saint weapons to tremble and retreat several steps. Kill! A roar rang out. The two Quasi-Emperor-level huge wolves of the Heavenly Wolf Pagoda also attacked. They howled crazily, their roars shaking the heavens as they launched a horrifying attack at Lu Ming. Following that, the Quasi-Emperors of the Golden Crow race, the Purple Extreme sect, and the Wind race attacked at the same time. 9 Quasi-Emperors attacked at the same time. Their auras were startling, as if they could blow up the world. The boundless pressure forced the surrounding spectators to retreat continuously. The people of the Profound Spirit Nation and the 9 nations of the Blue Sea frantically retreated. That pressure was too strong. If they were too close, they would probably explode from the pressure. Is this the strength of a sage emperor? The moment they attack, they have the power to shock the heavens. How horrifying! Such a thought appeared in many people's minds. Then, they looked at the figure surrounded by the many Quasi-Emperors. In the face of so many attacks, could he still block them all? Good timing! Lu Ming roared. His forehead lit up, and the Great Pill Derivation Cauldron appeared. It rapidly enlarged and shot backward. At the same time, he circulated the Primal Chaos Tribulation Finger and jabbed 5 fingers forward. Whoosh! Whoosh! The 5 huge fingers were like the fingers of a deity. They tore through the air and attacked the 5 Quasi-Emperor experts. Boom! Boom! Continuous explosions rang out as the 5 Primal Chaos Tribulation Fingers exploded. However, they managed to block the other party's attacks. Behind, the Great Pill Derivation Cauldron also blocked the attacks of the other 4 Quasi-Emperors. The Great Pill Derivation Cauldron trembled and flew back above Lu Ming's head. Lu Ming's body trembled, and his complexion paled somewhat. Although Xiao Chen's combat prowess was strong, he could defeat any one of the 9 Quasi-Emperors. He could even kill them. However, when 9 Quasi-Emperors attacked together, Xiao Chen's strength was insufficient. After all, the other party had 9 Quasi-Emperors. With 9 Quasi-Emperors working together, Xiao Chen was no match for them. His body trembled, and his qi and blood surged. However, when the others saw this scene, they felt nothing but shock. How can this be? The profound spirit nation's people and Xian Chuan could not help goggling, filled with disbelief. Chapter 1955. Lu Ming. Ruan Tianjiao and the others from the Bright Flame country clenched their fists. They didn't know why, but they suddenly felt proud of Lu Ming. Even they didn't know why. Maybe it had something to do with Lu Ming representing the Bright Flame country? In their memories, the sage emperor was a high and mighty figure who looked down on the world. He was the pinnacle of the 10,000 Seas realm. But now, Lu Ming was able to fight against 9 of them. It was too shocking. Is this the son of chaos? His combat strength is really heaven-defying. Not only were there people from the 10,000 Seas realm, but there were also people from the outside world. Many of them were attracted by the commotion and came to watch. At this moment, someone exclaimed. Not only the spectators, but even the Hung family quasi-emperor and the others who were fighting were very shocked. Lu Ming could actually stop them. Kill! The Hung family quasi-emperor shouted and was the first to attack again. He used a special technique and rushed toward Lu Ming. Then, the other quasi-emperors also attacked. Then I'll kill you first. Lu Ming's eyes were cold as he stared at the Wan family quasi-emperor and charged toward him. At the same time, Lu Ming waved his hand and 9 huge prison-suppressing monument phantoms appeared and suppressed the others. Lu Ming continued to charge toward the Hung family quasi-emperor. Chaotic Calamity Finger. Lu Ming attacked with all his strength and blasted out a Chaotic Calamity Finger. The Chaotic Calamity Finger blasted out and destroyed the Hung family quasi-emperor's attack. The Hung family quasi-emperor was blasted back rapidly and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The attacks of the other 8 quasi-emperors collided with the prison-suppressing monument phantoms formed by Lu Ming. The 9 prison-suppressing monument phantoms were destroyed and the remaining power surged toward Lu Ming, causing his body to tremble and blood to flow from his mouth. However, Lu Ming used this power to rush toward the Hung family quasi-emperor faster. Come in. Lu Ming opened the lid of the Great Evolution Pill Furnace. A terrifying suction force erupted from the Great Evolution Pill Furnace and sucked the Hung family quasi-emperor in. The quasi-emperor of the Hung clan was shocked. He struggled frantically and at the same time shouted, "Come and help me. Don't even think about it. Kill." The other 8 experts attacked at the same time. The sun, the gale, the giant wolf, etc., charged at Lu Ming. Lu Ming's eyes flashed with madness. Block it. With a thought, several hundred sacred weapons gathered to form a giant shield behind him. As for himself, he thrust out a finger and attacked the quasi-emperor of the Hung clan. Boom! The attacks of the 8 quasi-emperors landed on the shields made of hundreds of sacred weapons. The shields exploded with a loud bang. Some of the sacred weapons and great sacred weapons also exploded, turning into fragments that scattered in all directions. Only a dozen absolute saint weapons didn't explode. A total of over 200 saint weapons were destroyed just like that. This was definitely a great loss. But it was all worth it. This also bought time for Lu Ming. Under the guidance of the primal chaos tribulation, the quasi-emperor of the Hung clan nearly exploded, vomiting large mouthfuls of blood. Given that, how could he resist the pull of the Great Pill Derivation Furnace? The quasi-emperor of the Hung clan struggled frantically. However, he was still swallowed up by the Great Pill Derivation Furnace. Clang! Lu Ming closed the furnace lid and drove the furnace flame to refine the quasi-emperor of the Hung clan. Boom! Boom! The quasi-emperor of the Hung clan frantically attacked the furnace, trying to charge out. However, with Lu Ming's current cultivation, controlling the Great Pill Derivation Furnace, how could an ordinary quasi-emperor like him charge out? Attack! Save the Quasi-Emperor of the Han clan! The Quasi-Emperor of the Golden Crow race roared and charged at Lu Ming. At the same time, the other Quasi-Emperors also launched attacks at Lu Ming. Lu Ming used the Great Pill Derivation Furnace to block. Although he was at a disadvantage, the Quasi-Emperor of the Han clan could forget about severely injuring him within a short time. Lord Sage Emperor, this person is lawless. Now is the best time to attack and kill him. Xian Chuan sent a voice projection to the 3 Sage Emperors of the Time God Island. The 3 Quasi-Emperors of the Time God Island exchanged glances and saw murderous intent in each other's eyes. Lu Ming had killed several experts of the Time God Island on the Time God Island. He had to pay the price. Otherwise, where would the dignity of the Time God Island be? The 3 of them nodded and stepped out at the same time. A mysterious aura spread out from their bodies. Everyone was shocked. The Sage Emperors of the Time God Island were also about to make a move. Lu Ming. Yuan Tianjiao was worried. Previously, Lu Ming was clearly at a disadvantage. If the 3 Quasi-Emperors of the Time God Island were to join forces, Lu Ming would be at a disadvantage. Boom! 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 The 3 Quasi-Emperors of the Time God Island did not hesitate and attacked at the same time. 3 terrifying rays of divine light shot toward Lu Ming. There was actually a trace of the power of time among them. Lu Ming narrowed his eyes and prepared to block with all his might. However, at this moment, the space rippled and a huge transparent bubble appeared, enveloping the 3 Quasi-Emperors of the Time God Island. Bubble. Lu Ming's eyes lit up. Bubble had entered the 10,000 Seas realm with him. Unexpectedly, Bubble had also come to the Time God Island. Bubble appeared beside Lu Ming and muttered, "So many people are attacking Big Brother Lu Ming alone. In that case, I will attack you all as well." Chirp. Chirp. As Bubble muttered, its hands did not stop moving. With a wave of its hand, another transparent bubble appeared, enveloping the Quasi-Emperors of the Golden Crow race, the Wan clan, and the others. Kill. Lu Ming took the opportunity to charge at the Quasi-Emperor of the Wan clan. Earlier, he had lost so many sage weapons. In that case, he would get them back from this Quasi-Emperor of the Wan clan. The Quasi-Emperor of the Time God Island struggled frantically, trying to break free from the Time God Island. However, given Bubble's current cultivation, how could the Time God Island break free from the Time God Island so easily? Lu Ming raised the Great Pill Derivation Furnace and smashed it at the Quasi-Emperor of the Wan clan. Dong! The Great Pill Derivation Furnace ruthlessly smashed into the Quasi-Emperor of the Wan clan. The Quasi-Emperor of the Wan clan's skull nearly split open. Chop! Lu Ming grabbed a holy weapon battle saber beside him and slashed it down. Pfft! The Quasi-Emperor of the Wan clan was directly split in half. A Quasi-Emperor had fallen. Heavens! The people of the 10,000 Seas realm who were watching the battle were shocked. This Quasi-Emperor of the Sage Emperor level was killed just like that. The Sage Emperor was the peak of the 10,000 Seas realm. It was synonymous with invincibility. It turned out that invincible Sage Emperors could also die. Many people sighed. Including the Quasi-Emperor of the Great Pill Derivation Furnace, there were already 2 Quasi-Emperors. Lu Ming had killed 2 Sage Emperors. Who exactly was this young man? Many thoughts flashed through the minds of the 10,000 Seas realm cultivators. At this moment, the others had already broken free from the Time God Island and gathered together. Their eyes were incomparably grave. Time God Island. It's the Time God Island. The Sage Emperor of the Time God Island shouted excitedly. Their Time God Island also contained a trace of Time God Island's power. However, compared to Bubble, they were far inferior. Since you want to kill me, then kill to your heart's content today. Lu Ming's killing intent became even stronger. He stepped into the air and headed toward the remaining quasi-emperors. Since they wanted to kill him, then he would slaughter them all. The remaining quasi-emperors had incomparably grave expressions. Chapter 1956. If it was a head-on clash, they would not be afraid. The key was that the space-time laws were too mysterious. They were very useful in trapping the enemy. With the space-time laws trapping the enemy, Lu Ming would be the main attacker. When they worked together, their lethality was shocking. At this moment, a few more people came from afar. Their bodies were surrounded by the river of laws. More quasi-emperors came from the temporal divine island. They gathered together with the previous 3 quasi-emperors. A powerful aura pressed down on Lu Ming. A great battle was about to break out. Just at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the sky. This figure was enveloped by a mysterious energy. That area was completely distorted. It was as though space-time was changing. One could only vaguely see that it was a black-robed old man. When the quasi-emperors of the temporal divine island saw this old man, they all bowed and said, "Greetings, sacred master." "Greetings, sacred master." The expressions of the other people of the temporal divine island changed drastically as they bowed. "Sacred master?" Lu Ming narrowed his eyes. It seemed like this sacred master had a very high status. Even the quasi-emperors of the temporal divine island were respectful to him. The sacred master nodded slightly. Then, he looked at Lu Ming and revealed a kind smile. Then, he looked at the other quasi-emperors and said, "Everyone is a powerful expert. If we fight here, it will cause great damage to the temporal divine island. Can you give this old man some face and stop the battle temporarily?" Lu Ming smiled faintly and did not say anything. The quasi-emperors of the other forces looked at him with flickering eyes. However, they did not say anything. Now that Lu Ming and Dandan had increased their combat strength, they were not confident in winning even though they had the advantage in numbers. If the people of the temporal divine island withdrew, they would be even less confident. Reporting to the sacred master, this person killed several elders of the temporal divine island. "We cannot let him go." Xian Chuan was still unwilling to give up. He reported to the sacred master, wanting to borrow the strength of the temporal divine island to kill Lu Ming. "Are you teaching me how to do things?" The sacred master looked at Xian Chuan and his voice turned cold. Xian Chuan's expression changed drastically. He immediately knelt down and shouted with a pale face, "I dare not. I dare not. Please forgive me, sacred master." The sacred master ignored Xian Chuan. He continued to look at Lu Ming and the others. "If you all stop the battle, this old man. This old man." The sage sovereign's words stunned the people of the 10,000 Seas realm. These experts. In the 10,000 Seas realm, many people knew that the 10,000 Seas realm was connected to the other 8 realms. However, only saint emperors could come and go. It was said that the world beyond the heavens was vast and boundless. When martial arts were developed to the extreme, there were even immortal existences. However, all of this was just a legend. No one had ever verified it. Now, the sage master actually said that these people came from beyond the heavens. Maybe it was true. Otherwise, why would so many strong cultivators suddenly appear on the Time Divine Island? Beyond the heavens, beyond the heavens. So Lu Ming is from beyond the heavens. Only beyond the heavens can give birth to a heaven's pride like Lu Ming. While Nguyen Tianjiao was shocked, various thoughts flashed through his mind. The people of the 9 nations of the sea and the profound spirit nation were also dumbfounded. "Lu Ming, for the sake of the holy teacher, I'll spare your life today," said a giant wolf from the Sky Wolf Pagoda. "Spare my life? Huh, come Come, let's continue fighting. Let's see if you can take my life. Lu Ming's eyes emitted killing intent as he stared intently at the Heavenly Wolf Pagoda's giant wolf. This caused the huge wolf from the Heavenly Wolf Pagoda to have an unsightly expression. He was only trying to win with words. If they really fought, they didn't have the confidence to win. Saint Sovereign smiled bitterly and said, "Little brother, why don't we drop the matter for now? After you go to the Divine Mountain of Time and leave the Divine Island of Time, you can fight however you want. I won't interfere. Then let's give the Holy Teacher some face and spare their lives first." Lu Ming smiled faintly. If they really fought, although he wasn't afraid, if the people from the Divine Island of Time were added into the mix, he probably wouldn't have the upper hand. More importantly, the Holy Teacher gave him an unfathomable feeling. The expressions of the Heavenly Wolf Pagoda's giant wolf and the others were ugly, but they didn't refute. "Alright, thank you for giving me face, little brother. The people of the 10,000 Seas realm will stay here for the time being. No one is allowed to attack. Those who violate this rule will be killed without mercy," the Holy Teacher said coldly. The people from the Profound Spirit Nation had ugly expressions, but they didn't dare to refute the Holy Teacher's words. So many of their people had died, so they could only admit that they were unlucky. "Friends from beyond the heavens, if you want to explore the Divine Mountain of Time, then follow me." The Holy Teacher's voice spread in all directions. After saying that, he flew towards the depths of the Divine Island of Time. Lu Ming smiled and followed the Holy Teacher. The giant wolf from the Sky Wolf Pagoda, the quasi-emperors of the Golden Crow race, and the Wind race followed behind with gloomy faces. In the sky, figures streaked across the void. They were all experts from the outside world. They followed the Holy Teacher to the Divine Island of Time. So many people? The people from the 10,000 Seas realm were shocked. There were so many people from beyond the heavens, and each of them was a terrifying expert. Not long after, they arrived at the center of the Divine Island of Time. In front of them was a mountain that towered into the clouds. This mountain looked dead silent. At a glance, there were only bare rocks. Everyone's eyes narrowed. They saw withered bones in different parts of the mountain. They were almost decaying. Why were there so many withered bones on this mountain? Everyone stopped in their tracks, somewhat bewildered. "Everyone, this is the Divine Mountain of Time. The entire mountain is dead silent, and there are only a few plants," the Holy Teacher introduced. Everyone observed carefully. Indeed, there were some plants on the mountain. They were sparse and very rare. These plants have the power of time. If a cultivator consumes them, their lifespan will increase. The Holy Teacher continued. "What? It can increase one's lifespan?" someone exclaimed. His eyes were burning with passion. A martial emperor expert's lifespan was endless. Other than facing the great calamity of the world, they did not need to worry about their lifespan. However, those below the martial emperor realm had limited lifespan. A sage realm expert could live for more than 100,000 years. However, they could not live for more than 200,000 years. It was the same for boundary emperors. They were also within this range. This time, there were many ancient boundary emperors who came in. They were very old, and many of them were about to reach the end of their lifespan. Plants that could increase their lifespan were a fatal temptation to them. Also, there is a small tree at the peak of the Divine Mountain of Time. That is the Divine Tree of Time. If a cultivator consumes it, their lifespan will be doubled, the Holy Teacher added. Doubled lifespan. This time, the majority of the people revealed fiery greed. What did it mean to double one's lifespan? Some boundary emperors were about to reach the end of their lifespan. However, if their lifespan was doubled, they might be able to step into the martial emperor realm and obtain immortality. They would have an endless lifespan. Chapter 1957. That's mine. It's mine. Immediately, some people rushed towards the divine light sacred mountain. However, the few people who rushed at the front suddenly screamed in pain. A shocking scene appeared. The few people at the front stopped in the air and screamed in horror. Their old and shriveled bodies became even more shriveled. Their essence seemed to have been devoured in an instant. Then, their hair fell off, their clothes decayed, and their bodies seemed to have turned into skeletons. There was no aura on their bodies. Some people at the back had a drastic change of expression and retreated frantically. However, after retreating, each of them seemed to have aged a lot. In just a few breaths, each of them seemed to have aged 10,000 years. Looking at the front, the few people who flew at the front had turned into skeletons. What's going on? What's going on? My lifespan is about to run out. An old man whose hair was about to fall off roared. I haven't finished speaking yet. You guys are too anxious. The divine mountain of time is filled with the power of time. Any living being who goes up will be deprived of time. In the divine mountain of time, time passes faster. The sage master said indifferently. Time is passing faster. Damn it. Those who rushed forward roared. This time, they suffered a great loss. Those who were slower and did not go forward secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, they were a step slower. Otherwise, the consequences would be serious. Lu Ming, Bubbles, and some other young people did not go forward just now. They were still young. Things like lifespan were not attractive to them. Chirp chirp, on Lu Ming's shoulder, Bubbles chirped, staring at the small tree on the divine mountain of time. Bubbles, is that little tree of great use to you? Lu Ming transmitted his voice to Bubbles. Yes, chirp chirp. Bubbles nodded repeatedly. Lu Ming understood. Bubbles was a spacetime spirit mouse, and that small tree had the power of time. It was not surprising that it was useful to Bubbles. But how could he get it? Lu Ming thought secretly. Can't we go up the divine mountain of time? Someone asked in a deep voice. If he couldn't go up, then what was the point of coming here? It was better to explore other ruins as soon as possible. It's not that we can't go up at all. Follow me. After the sacred master finished speaking, he flew towards the side of the sacred mountain of time. Not long after, the sage master stopped. He pointed at the divine mountain of time and said, there is a canyon here. Every 3 months, the power of time in this canyon will drop to the lowest. At that time, you can pass through this canyon. And at the end of this canyon, there is an altar. As long as that altar is broken, the power of time in the entire sacred mountain of time will be greatly weakened. At that time, there will be a chance to set foot on the mountain peak and obtain the sacred tree of time. Then why don't you people from the Time Shrine Island go up? Someone raised a question and looked at the sage master with doubt. The others were the same. Some of them had a cold glint in their eyes. If there was any falsehood in the Saint Sovereign's words, or if there was some conspiracy, then they would be in danger. Many boundary emperors and saints had lived for a long time and were very calculative. Naturally, they would not easily trust the sage master. Because we are not strong enough. The sage master replied. Many people's eyes flashed. They could not refute the sage master's words. The cultivation level of the Infinite Seas realm was naturally incomparable to that of the Yuanlu. The difference was too great. The strongest people on the Time Shrine Island were boundary emperors. Moreover, there were not many of them. It was normal that they could not do it. How much longer will it take for the power of time in this canyon to weaken? Someone asked. There is still half a month. The sage master said. All right, then I will wait here. Someone sat cross-legged. Some people did the same. They sat cross-legged and waited quietly. Some people also looked around the Divine Light Shrine Mountain. Lu Ming and Bubbles also wandered around. Bang! Suddenly, someone stepped forward and walked toward the Divine Mountain of Time. It immediately attracted the attention of many people. It seemed that someone could not hold back and wanted to try it himself. However, that person was very cautious. He walked step by step very slowly. When he stepped into a certain range, his expression changed as if he was enveloped by a terrifying force. That person was a boundary emperor. His body was surrounded by a river of laws. Sacred power enveloped his entire body as he tried his best to resist the power of time in the outside world. Then, step by step, he walked toward the nearest plant. Many people's eyes lit up. The power of time in the Divine Mountain of Time was stronger the closer one was to the peak of the mountain. It was not completely impossible to resist the power of time in the periphery. As long as one could resist the power of time, one would be able to obtain some plants. The plants here could increase one's lifespan and were invaluable. Immediately, many people stepped forward and slowly walked toward the Divine Mountain of Time. Ah! However, not long after, someone shouted that he could not hold on anymore. That person's skin was slowly drying up. That person was so frightened that his expression changed drastically and he quickly retreated. The person who tried it first did not manage to reach the nearest plant. He could not resist the erosion of the power of time and retreated in defeat. Following that, the others did the same. Even with their emperor weapons, they could not resist the power of time. One by one, they retreated. None of them obtained a plant. Big brother Lu Ming, I want to try. Maybe I can use the power of time to cultivate. Chirp chirp. At that moment, Bubbles spoke. Alright, let's go together. Lu Ming nodded. He also wanted to see how strong the power of time in the Divine Mountain of Time was. Bang! Bang! Lu Ming stepped forward and walked toward the Divine Mountain of Time. Many people looked at Lu Ming. They also wanted to see how far the Son of Chaos could go. Lu Ming walked forward step by step. When he stepped into a certain area, a mysterious power acted on his body. That was the power of time. It was very similar to the power on Bubbles' body. The power of time was extremely terrifying. It was as if it wanted to seep into Lu Ming's body and deprive Lu Ming of his time and lifespan. Boom! Lu Ming unleashed his aura. Sacred power surrounded his body and the law of chaos spread out, blocking the power of time in the outside world. The power of time corresponded to the power of time. It was only an extremely powerful law of kings. It could not be compared to Bubbles' spacetime law, and naturally, it could not be compared to the law of chaos. Therefore, when the law of chaos appeared, the power of time in the outside world was blocked. Lu Ming continued to step forward, step by step, toward a plant. He did not walk very fast, but step by step, he walked with determination. The deeper he went, the stronger the power of time. However, Lu Ming still blocked it in the end. Bubbles sat on Lu Ming's shoulder and seemed to be seriously sensing the power of time in the outside world. Soon, Lu Ming approached the first plant. As expected of the Son of Chaos. He can control the law of chaos and even block the power of time. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.